The ultrasound photo slipped from Clara's purse and landed face up on the marble floor of the city's most expensive restaurant. Before she could snatch it back, a hand, adorned with rings that caught the light like warnings, reached it first. Roman DeLuca's dark eyes moved from the grainy image to her exhausted face, then down to the stomach she'd been hiding beneath oversized scrubs for months. In that frozen moment, surrounded by Manhattan's elite, a pregnant nurse who could barely afford her rent, locked eyes with a man whose family name made people cross the street. Everything was about to change. If you're hooked, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The double shift had been Clara's breaking point. 19 hours on her feet in the ICU at Mercy General, her lower back screaming with every step, her ankles swollen beneath scrubs that no longer disguised the curve of her belly. She'd skipped lunch again, not intentionally, but because Mrs. them. Patterson in 4C had coded twice, and then the teenager from the motorcycle accident needed someone to hold his hand while they set his compound fracture, and somehow the cafeteria had closed before Clara even looked at the clock. Now, at nearly 11 p.m., she stood outside Marcello's on Fifth Avenue, staring at the brass-handled doors with something close to despair. This had been a mistake, a terrible, foolish mistake. Her best friend Jen had insisted, "You need to eat something decent for once, my treat. We'll celebrate the baby, have one nice meal before your life becomes diapers and no sleep." Jen worked here as a weekend hostess, and she'd promised Clara the staff discount would make it almost affordable. Almost being the operative word that Clara should have paid attention to. But Jen had been so excited, and Clara had been so tired of eating cereal for dinner, and maybe, just maybe, she'd wanted one evening where she felt like a normal woman having a nice meal instead of a single mother-to-be who calculated the cost of prenatal vitamins against her electric bill. Clara pushed through the doors. The restaurant was a study in understated wealth. Cream-colored walls, soft lighting that made everyone look younger and more beautiful. Tables draped in cloth so white it seemed to glow. The quiet murmur of conversation mixed with the gentle clink of crystal and silverware. Everyone here moved slowly, deliberately, as if they had all the time in the world because money had bought it for them. Clara felt immediately, overwhelmingly out of place. Her scrubs were wrinkled and bore a small coffee stain near the collar, an accident from hour 14 when she'd been too exhausted to notice the cup tipping. Her hair, once pulled back in a neat ponytail, now escaped in frizzy strands around her face. She'd washed her hands at the hospital, but she could still smell the antiseptic on her skin, and she was achingly aware that she looked exactly like what she was, exhausted, underpaid, and drowning. "Clara!" Jen appeared from the back hallway, her smile bright and warm. She looked perfect in the restaurant's signature black dress, her makeup flawless, her hair swept up in an elegant twist. They'd been roommates in nursing school, back when Clara's biggest worry had been passing pharmacology, not whether she could afford both rent and groceries. "You made it. I was starting to think you'd bail." "I almost did," Clara managed a tired smile. "This place is way too fancy for me." "Nonsense. You deserve something nice." Jen linked her arm through Clara's and steered her toward a small table near the back. "I've got you set up in the quiet corner. You can put your feet up, eat slowly, and actually relax for once." The table was perfect, tucked away from the main dining room, positioned near a window that looked out over the glittering city. Clara sank into the cushioned chair with a sigh of relief, feeling her body start to unwind for the first time all day. "What sounds good?" Jen handed her a menu, but Clara barely glanced at it. "Whatever's cheapest," she said quietly. "I know you said you'd treat, but I can't let you—" "Clara, stop." Jen's voice was firm but kind. "You're eating the chicken marsala, you're having the house salad, and you're drinking something other than hospital coffee, non-negotiable." Clara felt her eyes burn with sudden tears. She was so tired of being proud, of pretending she had everything under control, of smiling through the exhaustion and fear. "Thank you," she whispered. Jen squeezed her hand. "That's what friends are for. Now sit tight. I'll get your order in and be back to check on you in a few minutes." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Clara alone in the quiet corner. For a moment, Clara just sat there, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation, and through the window, the city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds. It was beautiful, peaceful. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. Her hand drifted to her stomach, where the baby, her daughter, according to the ultrasound, shifted and turned. 5 months along now, and Clara still couldn't quite believe it was real. She'd been careful, she'd been smart. But one night with David, her boyfriend of 2 years, and suddenly her whole life had veered off course. Ex-boyfriend now. He'd made that clear when she told him about the pregnancy. "I'm not ready for this," he'd said, backing toward the door of her apartment like she was contagious. "I'm 28, Clara. I've got student loans and a career to build. I can't be a father right now." She'd wanted to point out that she was 26, drowning in her own debt, and working 60-hour weeks at a job that barely covered rent. That she wasn't ready either. That ready wasn't something that happened to people like them. They just had to figure it out as they went. But he'd been out the door before she could form the words, and she hadn't heard from him since. So now it was just Clara and the baby, navigating this terrifying new reality alone. She reached into her purse for her phone, thinking she'd text Jen a thank you, but her fingers found the corner of the ultrasound photo instead. She'd been carrying it everywhere, tucked into the inner pocket like a talisman. The grainy black and white image showed a tiny profile, a button nose, a curved spine, fingers that looked impossibly delicate. Her daughter. Real and growing, and depending on Clara to figure out how to do this. The thought was overwhelming. Clara pulled the photo out, studying it in the soft restaurant light. The technician had pointed out every detail: the 4 chambers of the heart, the stomach, the brain developing in perfect increments. "Everything looks great," she'd said cheerfully. "You're doing an amazing job, Mom." Clara had nodded and smiled, and pretended she felt like an amazing mom instead of a terrified woman who had no idea what she was doing. She was so absorbed in the image that she didn't notice Jen approaching until her friend set down a basket of bread and a glass of water. "You okay?" Jen asked softly. Clara looked up, quickly wiping at her eyes. "Yeah, just a lot. I know." Jen glanced at the ultrasound photo. "She's beautiful, Clara. And you're going to be an incredible mom." "I hope so." Clara tucked the photo back into her purse, or tried to. Her hands were shaking with exhaustion, and her coordination was shot after 19 hours on her feet. The purse, perched precariously on the edge of the table, tipped forward. Everything happened in slow motion. The bag tumbled to the floor with a crash that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet restaurant. The contents exploded across the marble, lipstick rolling under the next table, her wallet skidding toward the center of the room, loose change scattering like shrapnel. The ultrasound photo fluttered down last, landing face up directly in the middle of the aisle. Clara's face burned hot with humiliation. Every head in the restaurant turned. Conversations stopped. The quiet murmur died into silence, and suddenly, Clara was the center of attention. The tired, broke nurse in coffee-stained scrubs who couldn't even keep her purse on a table. "Oh my God." She dropped to her knees, scrambling to gather her things. Her hand shook as she snatched at her wallet, at coins, at the lip gloss that had rolled beneath a businessman's Italian leather shoes. I'm sorry. Jen knelt beside her. "It's okay. It's fine. People drop things all the time." But Clara could feel the stares, could sense the judgment radiating from every corner of the room. She was the wrong person in the wrong place, and everyone knew it. She reached for the ultrasound photo, but someone else got there first. A hand, male, with long fingers and rings that caught the light, picked up the image with careful precision. Clara's gaze traveled up from the hand to a wrist adorned with an expensive watch, to a forearm visible beneath rolled shirt sleeves, to broad shoulders encased in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and then to his face. He was younger than she expected, maybe 30, with sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't so severe. Dark hair cut close, dark eyes that studied the ultrasound photo with an intensity that made Clara's breath catch. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable, and there was something about the way he held himself, perfectly still, perfectly controlled, that sent a shiver down her spine. He looked like danger in an expensive suit. "Is this yours?" His voice was low, quiet, but it carried authority that made Clara's throat tighten. She nodded, unable to find words. He shifted his gaze from the photo to her face, and Clara felt pinned by the weight of his attention. His eyes took in everything. The exhaustion written in every line of her face, The scrubs that bagged at her shoulders because she'd lost weight everywhere except her belly. The hands that trembled as she reached for the image. Then his gaze dropped lower, to the curve of her stomach that she could no longer hide. Understanding flickered across his features. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, exactly, but a recognition that made Clara feel even more exposed than the scattered contents of her purse. "You should sit down," he said. Not a suggestion, a command, gentle but absolute. "I need to clean up." Clara's voice came out thin and embarrassed. "I'm blocking the aisle. I'm so sorry. Leave it." He stood in one fluid motion, and Clara realized he was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made the restaurant feel smaller. He extended his hand to her, palm up, waiting. Clara stared at it, at the rings that weren't flashy but were clearly expensive, at the faint scars on his knuckles that suggested he hadn't always solved problems with words. "I can manage," she said. "I know." His hand didn't waver. "Take it anyway." There was something in his tone, not kindness exactly, but a certainty that made arguing feel pointless. Clara placed her hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. The world tilted. Her vision grayed at the edges, and she swayed forward. His other hand caught her elbow, steadying her with a grip that was firm but not painful. "When did you last eat?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Clara answered automatically. "Breakfast, maybe. I had coffee around 3. "Coffee isn't food." He guided her back to her chair with the same quiet authority, his hand still on her elbow until she was seated. "Stay here." He turned away before she could protest, moving through the restaurant with the kind of confidence that parted crowds. Diners who'd been watching the spectacle suddenly found their plates fascinating. The businessman whose shoes had nearly been hit by Clara's lip gloss shifted back in his seat, giving the man a wide berth. Clara watched, bewildered, as he knelt in the aisle and began gathering her things. A man in a suit that probably cost thousands of dollars, collecting loose change and lipstick from a restaurant floor. It was surreal. Jen leaned close, her voice a frantic whisper. "Clara, do you know who that is?" "No, should I?" "That's Roman DeLuca." Jen's eyes were wide, as in the DeLuca family, as in his father basically owns half the city. The name meant nothing to Clara. She'd been too busy working double shifts and studying for her nursing boards to pay attention to society pages or business news. "So he's rich, okay?" "Rich doesn't even begin to cover it." Jen glanced nervously toward Roman, who was collecting the last of Clara's belongings with meticulous care. "The DeLucas are complicated. Old money, family business, connections to people you don't want to be connected to. My manager makes sure Roman always gets the best table, and nobody ever keeps him waiting. Nobody." Clara's stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that man doesn't kneel down for just anyone." Jen straightened as Roman approached. "Be careful, Clara." Roman returned with Clara's purse, now refilled with all her scattered belongings. He placed it carefully on the table beside her, then set the ultrasound photo on top, face down for privacy. "Thank you," Clara managed. "You didn't have to do that." "No." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down uninvited. "But you needed it done." Up close, he was even more intimidating. The soft restaurant lighting did nothing to soften the hard angles of his face or the intensity of his gaze. He studied her the way someone might study a puzzle, taking in details she didn't realize she was revealing. "You're a nurse," he said. Statement, not question. Clara nodded. "Where do you work?" "Mercy General, ICU." His eyes narrowed slightly. "That's a demanding unit. It pays the bills." Barely, but she didn't add that part. "And you worked a double shift today." It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. 19 hours. We're short-staffed and... She stopped, wondering why she was explaining herself to a stranger. "I should let you get back to your dinner. Thank you again for your help." She started to rise, but his voice stopped her. "Sit." The word was quiet but absolute. Clara found herself sinking back into the chair without meaning to, caught by the command in his tone. Roman leaned back, his posture relaxed, but his attention laser-focused. "When is your due date?" The question was too personal, too direct, and Clara should have told him it was none of his business. But there was something about the way he asked, Not invasive, just certain that she would answer, that made her defenses crumble. October, she heard herself say. October 15th. First child? Yes. Father involved? The question hit like a physical blow. Clara's hands curled into fists in her lap, and she looked away, blinking back sudden tears. No. Silence stretched between them. When Clara finally dared to glance back, Roman's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had darkened. Idiot, he said quietly. Clara let out a startled laugh that was half sob. Yeah, that's one word for him. Jen appeared with Clara's salad, her smile bright but her eyes wary as she glanced between Clara and Roman. Here you go, hun. Chicken marsala will be out in a few minutes. She set down the plate, then hesitated. Mr. DeLuca, can I get you anything? No. He didn't look away from Clara. Thank you, Jen. The fact that he knew her name made Jen's eyes widen, but she nodded and retreated quickly. Clara poked at her salad, suddenly not hungry despite having skipped 2 meals. The weight of Roman's attention was making her skin prickle with awareness. Eat, he said. I'm not really. You haven't eaten all day. Your hands are shaking. Your friend ordered you the chicken marsala, which means she knows you need protein and calories. Eat. The authoritative tone should have been annoying, should have made Clara bristle and defend her independence. Instead, she found herself picking up her fork and taking a bite of salad. It was delicious, crisp greens with candied walnuts and a vinaigrette that tasted expensive. And Clara hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite hit her tongue. She took another, then another, and suddenly she was eating steadily while Roman watched with an expression that might have been satisfaction. Better, he said. You're very bossy, Clara said between bites. Yes. No apology, no explanation, just acceptance of what he was. Clara should have been put off. She should have finished her meal quickly and left before this strange, intense man decided she was some kind of project. But something about his presence was oddly steadying. He wasn't looking at her with pity or judgment. He was just looking, seeing her in a way that made her feel less invisible than she had in months. Why are you still sitting here? She asked. Roman's dark eyes met hers. Because you're alone, exhausted, and pregnant. Because you dropped your purse and looked like the world was ending. Because the father of your child is an idiot who walked away, and you're working 19-hour shifts to make ends meet. He paused. And because I don't like it. The blunt honesty stole Clara's breath. You don't even know me. No, he agreed. Not yet. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Clara set down her fork, her heart beating faster. Mr. DeLuca? Roman. She took a breath. I appreciate your help tonight. Really, but I don't need someone to rescue me. I'm handling things. Are you? He gestured to the purse she'd dropped, to the ultrasound photo she'd been clutching like a lifeline. When did you last have a full meal? When did you last sleep more than 4 hours? When did you last sit down without calculating whether you can afford the time? Every question landed like an arrow finding its mark. Clara's throat tightened. I'm fine, she whispered. You're drowning. Roman's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. And you're too proud to admit it. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she had everything under control, that she didn't need some wealthy stranger pointing out all the ways she was barely surviving. But her eyes were burning with tears and her hands were shaking, and she was so damn tired of pretending. What do you want from me? The question came out broken. Roman leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his gaze never wavering. I want you to eat your dinner. I want you to take care of yourself and that baby, and I want you to stop carrying this alone. I barely know you. That, Roman said, is temporary. Before Clara could respond, Jen arrived with the chicken marsala, the scent of garlic and wine and mushrooms making Clara's mouth water despite her emotional upheaval. She set it down along with fresh bread and a side of roasted vegetables that Clara definitely hadn't ordered. Compliments of Mr. DeLuca, Jen said quietly, glancing at Roman with something between respect and fear. He'd ordered her extra food, without asking, without making a show of it. Clara stared at the plate, then at him. Why are you doing this? Roman stood, smoothing his suit jacket with precise movements. because someone should. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, setting it beside her plate. That's my personal number. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call. Clara picked up the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Just his name and a phone number, nothing else. I won't call, she said. You will. Roman's expression didn't change. When you're ready. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back. The baby. It's a girl? Clara nodded, her hand drifting instinctively to her stomach. Something shifted in Roman's features, just for a moment, so quick she almost missed it. Something that looked almost like longing or maybe regret before his mask of control slid back into place. She's lucky, he said quietly, to have a mother who fights this hard for her. Then he was gone, moving through the restaurant with the same commanding presence that had first caught Clara's attention. Diners parted for him automatically. The staff nodded respectfully. And Clara was left sitting alone, staring at a business card and trying to understand what had just happened. Jen slid into the chair Roman had vacated. Oh my God, Clara, what did he say to you? I don't know. Clara touched the business card, feeling the raised letters under her fingertips. I really don't know. But she tucked it carefully into her purse, right next to the ultrasound photo, and didn't throw it away. The food sat in front of her, still steaming, and Clara realized she was ravenous. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, while Jen peppered her with questions about Roman DeLuca and what they'd talked about. He just sat down, Clara tried to explain. Asked about the baby, told me to eat. That's it? Mostly. Clara didn't mention the way he'd looked at her, or the certainty in his voice when he'd said not yet, or the business card burning a hole in her purse. He was concerned, I guess. Roman DeLuca doesn't do concern, Jen said. He does business. He does family obligations. He does not sit down with random nurses and make sure they eat their vegetables. Clara pushed roasted carrots around her plate. Maybe I'm a special case, pregnant and pathetic. You're not pathetic. Jen's voice was fierce. You're surviving. There's a difference. But later, when Clara was back in her tiny studio apartment, lying in bed with her hand on her belly and her mind replaying the evening, she wondered if Roman had seen the difference, if he'd looked at her and seen strength, or just another woman who needed saving. The business card sat on her nightstand, propped against the lamp. She told herself she wouldn't call. She told herself she didn't need whatever he was offering, pity, charity, or something else she couldn't quite name, but she didn't throw the card away. 3 days later, Clara came home from another brutal shift to find a grocery delivery on her doorstep. Not just any groceries, high-quality staples, fresh produce, protein-rich foods, perfect for pregnancy. And tucked inside the first bag, a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. You need to eat. R. Clara stood in her doorway, staring at the bags with her heart hammering. She should have been angry, should have felt insulted that this man she barely knew had somehow found her address and decided she needed taking care of. Instead, she felt something crack open in her chest. She carried the bags inside and put everything away with shaking hands, then sat at her small kitchen table and cried for the first time since David had walked out. Not sad tears exactly. Just release. The overwhelming relief of not being quite so alone, even if she didn't understand why or how. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Did you get the delivery? Clara stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She should tell him to stop, to leave her alone, that she didn't need his help. Instead, she typed, How did you find my address? The response came immediately. I know people. Did you get the delivery? Yes. Good. Eat the salmon tonight. Omega-3s are important. Clara let out a startled laugh. You're really bossy. Yes. Are you working tomorrow? She should lie. Should tell him she had plans, a life. Things to do that didn't involve collapsing into bed after another shift. Double shift. 7 a.m. to midnight. The dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. That's too much. You need to cut back. I need to pay rent, Clara typed back. Bills don't care if I'm tired. A long pause. Then, what if they did? Clara frowned at her phone. What does that mean? We'll talk. Rest tonight. Eat the salmon. The conversation ended there, leaving Clara staring at her phone and wondering what she'd just agreed to. She ate the salmon. It was delicious. And when she went to bed that night, she slept better than she had in weeks. The business card still on her nightstand and her phone within reach. The second message came at 6:45 a.m. while Clara was getting ready for her shift. Eat breakfast before you leave. Clara stared at her phone, then at the kitchen where she'd been planning to grab a granola bar and run. I don't have time, she typed back. Make time. The baby needs it. Something about the way he phrased it, not you need it, but the baby, made Clara pause. She thought about the ultrasound photo, about her daughter growing inside her, depending on Clara to make the right choices even when they were hard. She made scrambled eggs and toast, eating quickly while standing at the counter. When she finished, she sent a photo of the empty plate. Happy? Yes. Have a good shift. It became a pattern. Every morning, a text reminding her to eat breakfast. Every evening, a check-in to make sure she'd had dinner. Sometimes it was just a simple eat something, and other times it was specific, protein and greens. The baby needs iron. Clara should have found it intrusive, should have told him to back off, that she was an adult who knew how to feed herself. But the truth was, she'd been skipping meals more often than not, and having someone notice, having someone care, made her more likely to stop and actually eat. On day 5, she came home to find another delivery. Prenatal vitamins, the expensive kind her OB had recommended but Clara couldn't afford. And a note. Take these. Daily. Clara called the number before she could talk herself out of it. Roman answered on the first ring. Clara. Not a question. He knew it was her. You have to stop sending me things, she said. Why? The directness threw her off balance. Because I don't know you. Because this is weird. Because I can't afford to pay you back for any of this. I'm not asking you to pay me back. Then what are you asking for? Silence stretched between them. Clara could hear something in the background. Voices, maybe, or the sound of traffic. Wherever he was, it wasn't quiet. I'm asking you to take care of yourself, Roman said finally. And the baby. That's all. Why? Clara's voice cracked. Why do you care? Another pause, longer this time. When Roman spoke again, his voice was lower, rougher. Because I watched you scramble to pick up loose change in a restaurant while you were barely holding yourself upright. Because you're working yourself to death for a baby whose father was stupid enough to walk away. Because someone should care, and right now, that someone is me. Clara's throat tightened. You don't owe me anything. I know. The certainty in his voice made her chest ache. This isn't about owing. This is about what's right. And what's right is you playing guardian angel to a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. Roman's tone shifted, became almost gentle. You're Clara. You work ICU at Mercy General. You like your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. You're having a daughter in October and you're terrified and you're not sleeping enough. And you deserve better than what you're getting. Say, the fact that he'd noticed all of that he'd been paying attention, made Clara's eyes burn. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll take the vitamins. Say you'll eat regular meals. Say you'll let me help just a little until things get easier. Clara looked at the vitamins, at the careful way they'd been packaged and delivered, at the evidence that someone was thinking about her, worrying about her, making sure she didn't disappear into the exhaustion. Okay, she said. Okay. She could almost hear Roman's satisfaction through the phone. Good. Now eat dinner. Something with protein. Bossy, Clara said, but she was smiling. Yes. Get used to it. The call ended, leaving Clara standing in her kitchen with a bottle of prenatal vitamins and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being cared for. It should have scared her. Instead, it felt like coming up for air. On day 8, Roman called at midnight. Clara was just getting home from her shift, exhausted and aching, when her phone buzzed. Hello? You sound tired. Roman's voice was quiet, almost gentle in the darkness. I am tired. It's midnight. I know. I wanted to make sure you got home safely. Clara fumbled with her keys, phone wedged against her shoulder. How did you know I was just getting home? I know your schedule. The statement should have been creepy. Instead, it was oddly comforting. You're keeping tabs on me? Someone should. A pause. Did you eat dinner? Clara thought about the vending machine sandwich she'd grabbed at 10 p.m. Sort of. That's not an answer. I had a sandwich. Roman made a sound of disapproval. That's not dinner. That's barely a snack. It's what I had time for. Clara finally got her door open and stumbled inside, dropping her bag on the floor. We had 3 trauma cases come in back to back, and You need to eat something now. Real food. Roman, I'm exhausted. I just want to sleep. After you eat. His tone left no room for argument. Check your fridge. Clara, confused, walked to her small kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Inside, arranged neatly on the middle shelf, was a prepared meal. Chicken, rice, steamed vegetables, still warm in its container. Her breath caught. How? I had it delivered an hour ago. Timed for when you'd get home. Clara stared at the food, something huge and overwhelming rising in her chest. You can't keep doing this. Why not? Because... Her voice broke. Because I don't understand why you care this much. We met once. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything, and I can't. I can't owe you either. Silence stretched between them, long enough that Clara thought he might have hung up. Then Roman's voice came through, low and serious. You don't owe me anything, Clara. Not one thing. This isn't a transaction. He paused. My father is in the hospital, has been for 3 weeks. Heart surgery, complications, the kind of situation where you don't know day to day if he's going to make it. Clara's medical training kicked in automatically. I'm sorry, that must be terrifying. It is. Roman's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the emotion beneath it. And every day, I watch nurses like you take care of him. I see how hard you work, how much you give, how little you're appreciated for it. So when I saw you in that restaurant, exhausted and alone and still fighting, I couldn't just walk away. Clara's throat tightened. Roman, eat the dinner, he said quietly. Take your vitamins, get some sleep. Let me do this one small thing to make your life a little easier. Please. The please did it. Not a command this time, but a request. An admission that maybe he needed this as much as she did. Okay, Clara whispered. Thank you. She could hear the relief in his voice. I'll talk to you tomorrow. The call ended and Clara was left standing in her kitchen, staring at a meal someone had prepared specifically for her, timed to arrive exactly when she needed it. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, and tried not to think about how dangerous it was to start depending on this kind of care. But she took her vitamins, and she slept better than she had in weeks. And when she woke up to a text from Roman asking how she'd slept, she answered honestly instead of deflecting. Better. Thank you. Good. Eat breakfast. She smiled and made herself eggs. The shift happened on day 12. Clara was assigned to the cardiac ICU, a rotation she usually dreaded because it was high stress and understaffed, and she was halfway through checking her patient roster when she saw the name. DeLuca, Vincenzo. Room 8. Her breath caught. She stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the assignment sheet, while her mind raced. This was Roman's father, the man whose illness had somehow led Roman to notice her, to care about her situation, to insert himself into her life with such quiet determination. And now she was going to be his nurse. Clara's hands trembled as she gathered her supplies. This felt too close, too personal, like crossing a line she hadn't even known existed. But she couldn't ask for a different assignment without explaining why. And she had no good explanation that didn't sound absurd. I've been texting with his son. He sends me groceries and makes sure I eat. I'm half afraid I'm falling for him, even though we barely know each other. Yeah, that would go over well. So Clara took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the break room mirror to make sure she looked professional, and headed to room 8. The man in the bed was in his early 60s, pale and weak, but with the same dark eyes as his son. He was awake, watching her approach with an alertness that suggested his mind was sharp, even if his body was failing. Mr. DeLuca, Clara said gently, I'm Clara, your nurse for today. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck. His voice was rough but not unkind. But I've been told that's normal after open heart surgery. Clara smiled, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. It is, but your numbers are looking good. Heart rate steady, blood pressure responding well to medication. You're healing. Vincenzo watched her work with an intensity that reminded her unnervingly of Roman. You're new to this rotation. I am. I usually work general ICU, but they needed coverage up here. Lucky me. He winced as she adjusted his IV. Though I'm starting to think this hospital is where people come to be tortured, not healed. If it makes you feel better, the torture is a sign that you're getting better. Clara marked his chart, then pulled up a chair beside his bed. Any pain right now? Nausea? Dizziness? All of the above. But Vincenzo was smiling slightly. You're good at this. Calm. Most nurses are afraid to talk to me. Clara raised an eyebrow. Should I be afraid? Probably. His smile widened. My son says I'm intimidating. Her heart skipped. Your son? Roman. He visits every day, watches the nurses like a hawk, makes sure I'm getting the best care. Vincenzo's gaze sharpened. He's protective, sometimes too protective. Comes from growing up in our family. Clara wasn't sure what to say to that, so she focused on adjusting his pillows, making him more comfortable. He mentioned you, Vincenzo said casually. Clara's hand stilled. What? Roman. He told me about a nurse he met, said she was working too hard, needed looking after. Vincenzo studied her with those dark, knowing eyes. He didn't mention she was beautiful. Clara's face flushed hot. Mr. DeLuca, Vincenzo, please. He shifted in bed, grimacing slightly. And don't be embarrassed. My son doesn't notice people often. When he does, it means something. We barely know each other, Clara said quietly. Yet. Vincenzo's smile was knowing. Give it time. Before Clara could respond, the door opened and Roman walked in. He stopped dead when he saw her, his expression flickering through surprise, recognition, and something darker that Clara couldn't quite read. Then his mask of control slid back into place, and he was moving forward again, his attention shifting between Clara and his father. You're looking better, Roman said to Vincenzo, but his gaze was on Clara. I have a good nurse. Vincenzo's tone was innocent, but his eyes gleamed with amusement. Clara here has been taking excellent care of me. Roman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Has she? It wasn't a question. Clara cleared her throat, suddenly desperate to escape the tension in the room. I'll give you two some privacy. Mr. D. Vincenzo, press the call button if you need anything. She moved toward the door, but Roman's voice stopped her. Clara? A word? She turned, finding him already at the door, holding it open and waiting. Vincenzo watched the exchange with obvious interest, looking far too pleased for a man who'd just had open-heart surgery. Clara followed Roman into the hallway, her heart hammering. He led her to a quiet corner, away from the nurse's station, then turned to face her. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. You didn't tell me you were working this rotation, he said. I didn't know I would be until this morning. Clara crossed her arms, defensive. They moved me to cover someone's sick leave. For how long? 2 weeks, maybe more. Roman processed this, his expression unreadable. You're going to be my father's nurse. It's my job, Roman. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect styling. I didn't expect this. Clara softened slightly. How is he really, beyond the chart notes? Scared. Angry. Trying to pretend he's fine when he's not. Roman's gaze met hers. He needs good care. Consistent care. Someone who won't be intimidated by him. I'm not easily intimidated. The ghost of a smile crossed Roman's face. I noticed. They stood there in the quiet hallway, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. Clara could hear the beep of monitors, the distant murmur of voices, the hum of the hospital continuing around them. This makes things complicated, she said finally. Yes. You can't use this to keep tabs on me, or control my shifts, or influence my work. Roman's expression hardened. I would never compromise your job. But you'll send groceries to my apartment and call to make sure I'm eating? That's different. How? Because that's about you. Roman stepped closer, close enough that Clara could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. This is about my father getting the best care possible, which, apparently, is you. Clara's breath caught at the compliment. I'm just doing my job. You're doing more than that. Roman's voice dropped lower. You care. Really care. I see it in how you interact with patients, how you talk to families. It's not just a job to you. It never has been. Clara looked away, uncomfortable with the intensity of his attention. But it's still my job, Roman, and your father is my patient. That has to come first. I know. He reached out, then stopped himself, his hand falling back to his side. I won't make this harder for you, I promise. Clara nodded, not quite trusting herself to speak. But I'm not going to stop checking on you either, Roman continued. Or making sure you're taking care of yourself. Those things aren't connected to my father, they're about you. Why? The question came out more plaintive than Clara intended. Why do you care so much? Roman was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Because when I saw you in that restaurant fighting so hard to keep it together, I recognized something. Someone who gives everything to everyone else and saves nothing for themselves. His voice roughened. Someone who deserves better than they're getting. Claire's throat tightened. Roman, I have to go, he said abruptly. I have a meeting. But Clara, thank you for taking care of him. He turned and walked away before she could respond, leaving Clara standing in the hallway with her heart racing and her carefully constructed walls starting to crack. She went back to work, but she felt Roman's absence like a physical thing. And when she checked on Vincenzo, an hour later, the older man was smiling. My son looked at you like you were the only person in the hospital, Vincenzo said. Like you were the only person in the world. Clara's face heated. He's just worried about you. Maybe. Vincenzo's knowing gaze said he didn't believe that for a second. Or maybe he's finally found something, someone worth worrying about besides family business. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on checking his vitals and changing his IV bag and pretending her hands weren't shaking. But she thought about Roman's words for the rest of her shift, someone who deserves better than they're getting. And for the first time in months, Clara let herself wonder what better might actually look like. The pattern settled into Clara's life with surprising ease over the next week. She'd arrive for her shift, check on Vincenzo first thing, and find Roman already there, sitting in the chair beside his father's bed, laptop open, conducting business from the ICU like it was just another office. He never interfered with her work, never questioned her medical decisions or demanded special treatment. But he watched, always watched with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail, every moment of strain or exhaustion that crossed her face. Your son is very dedicated, Clara told Vincenzo on the third day, adjusting the older man's medication drip. Vincenzo snorted. My son is very stubborn. Once he decides something matters, he doesn't let go. The words felt weighted with meaning Clara wasn't quite ready to examine. Roman had taken to walking her to her car after her shifts ended. It started the second night when he'd appeared in the hallway at 11 p.m. and said simply, I'll walk you out. Clara had protested. The parking garage is perfectly safe. Humor me. So she did, and it became routine. They'd walk through the quiet hospital corridors, take the elevator down to the basement parking level, and Roman would wait while she unlocked her aging Honda Civic before bidding her goodnight. They talked during those walks. Small things at first, how Vincenzo's recovery was progressing, whether Clara's ankles were swelling less, if she'd remembered to eat lunch. But gradually, the conversations deepened. What made you want to be a nurse? Roman asked one night. Clara thought back to her childhood, to her mother's long illness and the nurses who'd made those final months bearable. I wanted to be the person who makes the difference when everything feels impossible, who shows up when it matters most. You're that person, Roman's voice was certain. I see it every day with my father. He's getting stronger, Clara said. His heart function is improving, his stamina is building. He might be able to go home in another week. Roman stopped walking. They'd reached her car, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across his face. And then you won't be his nurse anymore. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. No, I'll rotate back to general ICU, and we won't see each other every day. Clara's heart stuttered. No, we won't. Roman studied her face in the dim light. and Clara felt exposed under his gaze. Would that bother you, not seeing me? She should have lied, should have kept her professional distance and pretended the past week hadn't changed anything. But she was tired of lying, tired of pretending she didn't feel the pull between them growing stronger with every conversation. Yes, she whispered. It would. Something flashed in Roman's eyes, satisfaction, relief, something darker and more possessive that made Clara's breath catch. Good, he said quietly, because I'm not planning to stop. Stop what? This. He gestured between them, checking on you, making sure you're taking care of yourself, being part of your life. Clara's hands tightened on her car keys. Roman, I don't understand what this is. What you want from me. I want you to let me in. His voice was low and tense. I want you to stop carrying everything alone. I want... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. I want more than I should, probably. But I'm not going to apologize for it. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat. I'm pregnant with another man's baby. I'm broke, exhausted, and barely keeping my head above water. Why would you want any part of that? Roman stepped closer, and Clara's back pressed against her car door. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat of him, the intensity of his focus. Because you're strong, he said. Because you fight for what matters. Because you care about people. Really care. In a way that's rare. Because when you smile, it's real. And when you laugh, I want to be the reason for it. His gaze dropped to her stomach, then back to her face. And because that baby deserves someone who will show up. Who will stay. Who will protect both of you. Tears burned Clara's eyes. You don't know me well enough to I know enough. Roman's hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. I know you eat cereal for dinner when you're too tired to cook. I know you take the overnight shifts so the other nurses can see their kids. I know you cry when patients don't make it, even though you try to hide it. I know you're terrified of being a mother and convinced you're going to fail at it, even though anyone can see you're going to be amazing. Clara's breath caught. How do you know all that? Because I pay attention. His voice softened. Because you matter to me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and danger and something that felt terrifyingly close to hope. This is crazy, Clara whispered. Probably. Roman's lips curved slightly. Are you going to run? Clara should have said yes, should have gotten in her car, driven away, and put distance between herself and this intense, complicated man who was offering things she'd been afraid to even want. Instead, she said no, not yet. Good. Roman finally let his hand drop. Go home. Eat something. Sleep. I'll see you tomorrow. Clara got in her car on shaking legs and drove home, but she could feel his gaze following her all the way out of the parking garage. When she got to her apartment, there was another delivery waiting, this time a pregnancy pillow and a note that read simply, for better sleep. Clara set up the pillow, crawled into bed, and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to stop fighting alone. The next morning, Vincenzo was sitting up when Clara arrived for her shift, looking more alert than she'd seen him since his surgery. You're looking better, she said, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. I'm feeling better. Vincenzo's sharp gaze tracked her movements. My son tells me you're an excellent nurse. Clara's face warmed. Your son is biased. My son is never biased. He's brutally honest, sometimes to a fault. Vincenzo shifted in bed, wincing slightly. Which is why I believe him when he says you're special. Clara busied herself with adjusting his IV, unwilling to meet his knowing eyes. I'm just doing my job, Mr. DeLuca. Vincenzo, and we both know it's more than that. His voice gentled. My son has been alone for a long time. Focused on family, on business, on responsibilities that would crush most men his age. He doesn't let people in, doesn't let himself want things that aren't about duty. Clara's hand stilled on the IV stand. Why are you telling me this? Because the way he looks at you is different. Vincenzo's gaze was steady. Like maybe, for the first time, he's found something that matters more than obligation. We barely know each other, Clara protested weakly. Time isn't the only measure of connection. Vincenzo settled back against his pillows. My wife, Roman's mother, I knew her for 3 days before I asked her to marry me. Everyone said I was crazy, said I was too young, too impulsive, that it would never last. What happened? Vincenzo's expression softened with memory. 28 years of marriage before cancer took her. 28 years of the best partnership I could have imagined. And I knew, from those first 3 days, that she was the one. Clara's throat tightened. I'm not. This situation is complicated. Most worthwhile things are. Vincenzo's gaze sharpened. But let me ask you something, Clara. When my son walks into a room, does your heart beat faster? When he asks if you're okay, do you feel seen in a way you haven't before? When you think about not having him in your life, does it feel like losing something important? Clara couldn't speak, couldn't deny the truth in his words. That's what I thought. Vincenzo smiled. Whatever complications exist, don't let them make you run from something real. My son doesn't offer his protection lightly, doesn't invest himself in people unless they matter. If he's chosen you, there's a reason. I'm pregnant, Clara said, the words bursting out, with another man's baby. Your son deserves someone without this kind of baggage. Vincenzo's expression didn't change. My son deserves someone who makes him happy, someone who reminds him there's more to life than business and family obligations, someone who fights for what matters. His voice softened. That's you, Clara. The baby is just part of the package. And if I know my son, he's already decided that package is worth protecting. Before Clara could respond, Roman walked in carrying 2 coffee cups and a bag from the bakery down the street. He stopped when he saw them, his gaze moving between Clara and his father with sharp assessment. Am I interrupting? His tone was neutral, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. Just having a conversation, Vincenzo said cheerfully. Clara was telling me about my recovery timeline. It was a blatant lie, and they all knew it, but Roman didn't call his father out. Instead, he handed one of the coffee cups to Clara. Extra cream, barely any sugar, he said, and a blueberry muffin because you didn't eat breakfast this morning. Clara stared at the cup, at the muffin, at this man who somehow knew her coffee order and had noticed she'd skipped a meal. How did you? You texted me at 6 a.m. You never text that early unless you overslept and skipped breakfast. Roman set his own coffee down and pulled out his laptop. Eat. Vincenzo watched the exchange with barely concealed amusement. Told you, he said to Clara, brutally honest and remarkably observant. Clara took the muffin with shaking hands, overwhelmed by the simple act of being known, being noticed, being cared for in such specific ways. She ate while reviewing Vincenzo's charts, hyper-aware of Roman's presence in the room. He worked quietly, typing emails and taking calls in low tones, but she felt his attention on her like a physical touch. When her shift break came 2 hours later, Roman followed her to the break room. You need to stop doing that, Clara said, pouring herself water from the cooler. Doing what? Bringing me food, knowing my coffee order, noticing when I skip meals. She turned to face him. It's too much. Roman leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Too much for who? Me or you? Both. Neither. I don't know. Clara set down her water cup. This thing between us, whatever it is, it's moving too fast. I need to slow down. I need space to think. What are you thinking about? The directness of the question threw her. About whether this is real or if you're just, I don't know, going through something because of your father's illness. About whether I'm being smart or stupid. About what happens when reality sets in and you realize I'm not some project to fix, but a real person with real problems. Roman pushed off the counter, moving closer until Clara had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You think I don't know you're real? That I don't see the problems you're dealing with? I think you see someone you want to help, Clara said quietly. And I think you're a good man who takes care of people. But I'm not sure that's the same as whatever this is supposed to be. This, Roman said, his voice dropping low, is me trying to show you that you don't have to do everything alone. It's okay to let someone care about you, that you deserve more than survival. And what do you get out of it? Clara's voice cracked. What do you want from me, Roman? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. I want you to trust me. I want you to let me be there for you and the baby. He stopped, jaw tightening. I want things I probably shouldn't want this soon. But I'm not going to lie to you about them. Clara's heart hammered. What things? Roman's hand lifted, his fingers brushing her cheek so gently It was almost not a touch at all. I want to be the person you call when you're scared. I want to be there when the baby comes. I want to build something with you that's real and permanent and safe. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I want you, Clara. All of you. The struggles, the baby, the complications, everything. Clara's breath stopped. That's crazy. Maybe. His lips curved slightly. But it's true. She should have pulled back, should have reminded him they'd known each other for less than 2 weeks, should have protected her heart from the inevitable fall that would come when he realized what he was really signing up for. Instead, she leaned into his touch, just slightly, and let herself feel wanted. The moment shattered when Clara's pager went off, a code in another room, someone crashing, all hands needed immediately. She jerked back, professional instincts taking over. I have to go. I know. Roman's hand dropped, but his eyes stayed on her face. This conversation isn't over. Clara ran. She spent the next hour helping stabilize a patient who'd gone into cardiac arrest, her training taking over, her personal crisis pushed aside for the immediate demands of saving a life. They got him back, got him stable, and Clara finally stumbled out of the room with shaking hands and adrenaline still flooding her system. Roman was waiting in the hallway. You need to eat something, he said, taking in her pale face and trembling hands. And sit down. I need to check on your father. He's stable and sleeping. I just checked. Roman guided her toward the break room with a hand on her lower back. Sit. I'll get you something from the cafeteria. Clara wanted to argue, but her legs were shaky and her stomach was churning with reaction. She sank into a chair while Roman disappeared, returning 10 minutes later with soup, crackers, and orange juice. Eat slowly, he instructed, setting the food in front of her. Your hands are still shaking. They were. Clara wrapped them around the soup cup, letting the warmth steady her. Roman sat across from her, watching with that intense focus that made her feel simultaneously exposed and safe. Rough code? They usually are. Clara sipped the soup, feeling her system start to settle. But we got him back. He'll make it. Because of you. Because of the team. Clara set down the cup. I was just one person doing one job. You always minimize what you do. Roman's voice was thoughtful. Why is that? Clara shrugged, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. Because it's just my job. It's what I signed up for. No. Roman leaned forward, elbows on the table. Other nurses do their jobs. You do something more. You fight for your patients like their family. You give everything you have, even when you're exhausted. That's not just a job. That's a calling. Clara's eyes burned. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? Why am I still barely scraping by, still struggling to make rent, still terrified I'm going to fail at the one thing that matters most? Being a mother? Yes. The word came out broken. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I can't give her what she needs? What if I'm so exhausted from work that I don't have anything left for her? Roman reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was warm, steady, anchoring. You won't be terrible. You'll be exactly what she needs. You don't know that. I do. His certainty was absolute. Because I've watched you with patience. I've seen how you care, how you notice the small things, how you make people feel seen and valued. You'll do the same for your daughter, better, because she's yours. Clara's throat tightened. And when the father shows up wanting custody, when I have to explain why her dad isn't around, when she asks questions I don't have good answers for, then you tell her the truth. Roman's grip tightened. That sometimes people make mistakes, that sometimes the people who should stay don't, but that you loved her enough to stay, to fight, to give her everything you had. That's not going to be enough, Clara whispered. It will be. Roman's voice was fierce. And she won't be without a father figure. Not if I have anything to say about it. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding. Roman, you can't. I can. I am. He stood, pulling her to her feet with him. I know this is fast. I know it's crazy. But I also know what I want, Clara. And what I want is you and that baby in my life. Permanently. Clara's vision blurred with tears. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. Roman's hands framed her face, his touch gentle, despite the intensity in his eyes. Have dinner with me, not as your patient son, but as a man who wants to know everything about you. Let me in, Clara. Really in. She should have said no, should have maintained professional boundaries and protected her heart from the inevitable hurt. But she was so tired of being alone, so tired of fighting every battle by herself. And Roman was offering something she'd been afraid to even want: partnership, protection, a place to rest. Okay, she breathed. Dinner. Roman's expression transformed, a smile breaking through the usual stern control. Tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. I work until 6. Then I'll pick you up at 7:30. Wear something comfortable. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. And Clara, this is a real date, not just food delivery or checking on you. A real date where we talk about more than my father's recovery and your work schedule. Clara's stomach fluttered with nerves and anticipation. What will we talk about? Everything. Roman's smile widened. I want to know everything about you. He left her standing in the break room, her heart racing and her carefully constructed walls crumbling a little more. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Clara checked on Vincenzo, who took one look at her face and grinned knowingly. She avoided Roman's gaze when he returned to his father's room, too aware of the heat in her cheeks and the way her pulse jumped every time she caught sight of him. When her shift finally ended, Roman walked her to her car as usual. But this time, when they reached the Honda, he didn't immediately step back. I meant what I said earlier, he told her quietly. All of it. Clara's breath caught. Which part? Every part. His hand lifted, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. But especially the part about wanting you in my life, about being there for you and the baby, about building something real. Roman, you don't have to say anything now. His fingers trailed down her jaw, a whisper of touch that made her shiver. Just think about it. Think about what it could be like to not be alone anymore. He stepped back before Clara could respond, letting her get into her car with trembling hands and a mind full of dangerous possibilities. That night, lying in bed with the pregnancy pillow Roman had sent, Clara let herself imagine what he was offering. A partnership, protection, someone who showed up and stayed and cared about the details of her life. It was terrifying. It was also the most tempting thing she'd ever been offered. Her phone buzzed with a text. Did you eat dinner? Clara smiled despite herself. Yes. Leftover soup from lunch. That's not dinner. That's a snack. It had crackers. Clara. She could practically hear the exasperation in his tone. Fine. I'll make eggs. Good. And tomorrow night, I'm feeding you properly. Clara's stomach fluttered. It's just dinner, Roman. No, he texted back. It's everything. Clara stared at her phone for a long time, then typed, I'm scared. The response came immediately. I know, but I'm not going anywhere. She fell asleep with her phone on her pillow and Roman's promise echoing in her mind. The next day at work, Vincenzo was sitting up and looking stronger than Clara had seen him since the surgery. His color was better, his breathing easier, and his monitor showed heart rhythms that made Clara's professional heart sing. You're doing amazingly well, she told him, reviewing his charts. Dr. Morrison is going to be thrilled with these numbers. I have good motivation to heal. Vincenzo's gaze was knowing. My son tells me he's taking you to dinner tonight. Clara's face heated. He did he? He sounded happy about it. Roman doesn't sound happy often. Vincenzo shifted in bed, his expression growing serious. I need to tell you something, Clara. About my family. About the business. Clara's stomach tightened. You don't have to. I do. Vincenzo's voice was firm. Because if you're going to be part of Roman's life, you need to understand what that means. What you'd be stepping into. Clara set down the chart, giving him her full attention. My family has been in business in this city for 3 generations, Vincenzo began. Import-export, real estate, various investments, legitimate businesses, all of them. But there was a time, when I was younger, when my father was still alive, when the lines were blurrier, when deals were made that shouldn't have been made. Clara's pulse quickened, but she stayed quiet. I spent 20 years cleaning up those mistakes, Vincenzo continued, making the business legitimate, cutting ties with people who operated in gray areas. It cost us money, cost us connections, but it was worth it. I wanted my son to inherit something clean, something he could be proud of. Did it work? Clara asked quietly. Mostly. Vincenzo's expression darkened. But old connections don't disappear just because you want them to. There are people who remember the old days, who think they still have claims on the DeLuca name, who don't like that we went legitimate. Clara's hands clenched on the bed rail. Are you saying Roman is in danger? I'm saying the world my son operates in is complicated, that there are people who might try to use anyone he cares about as leverage, that loving him means accepting certain precautions. Vincenzo's gaze was steady. I'm not trying to scare you away. I'm trying to be honest about what you'd be taking on. Clara thought about the way Roman moved through the world, the respect people showed him, the careful distance others maintained, the sense of controlled power that radiated from him even in quiet moments. He's more than just a businessman, isn't he? She said. He's the head of the family now, has been since I got sick. Vincenzo's voice held pride and sorrow. It's a heavy burden for someone his age, responsibilities that would crush most men, but he carries it because it's his duty. And you think he needs someone to share that burden with? I think he needs someone who reminds him he's more than just duty. Vincenzo reached out, his hand covering Clara's. You do that for him. I see it in how he looks at you, how he talks about you. You make him remember there's more to life than obligation. Clara's throat tightened. I'm not sure I'm strong enough for what you're describing. You're stronger than you think. Vincenzo squeezed her hand. You're a single mother working brutal hours to provide for your child. You save lives every day. You fight for people who can't fight for themselves. That's exactly the kind of strength my son needs beside him. Before Clara could respond, the door opened and Roman walked in. His gaze went immediately to where Vincenzo was holding Clara's hand, then to Clara's face, reading her expression with that uncanny accuracy. Everything okay? His voice was carefully neutral. Everything's fine, Vincenzo said, releasing Clara's hand. I was just telling Clara about the family business. Roman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Were you? She deserved to know. Vincenzo's tone left no room for argument. Before tonight, Roman's gaze shifted to Clara, dark and intense. And now that you know, Clara looked between father and son, seeing the tension in Roman's shoulders, the concern in Vincenzo's eyes. She thought about everything she'd learned, about old connections and complicated histories and the weight of responsibility Roman carried. She thought about running, about protecting herself and her baby from a world that sounded dangerous and complicated, but she also thought about Roman's steady presence, about the way he showed up and stayed, about how he made her feel seen and valued and less alone than she'd felt in years. I still want to have dinner, she said quietly. The relief that flashed across Roman's face was so profound it made Clara's chest ache. Good, he said, because I already made reservations. Vincenzo chuckled. My son doesn't handle uncertainty well. He was probably prepared to convince you even if you'd said no. I don't need to convince her. Roman's gaze stayed on Clara's face. She's smart enough to make her own decisions. The trust in those words, the respect, made Clara's breath catch. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves. Clara finished her shift, went home to change, and stood in front of her limited wardrobe trying to figure out what comfortable meant for a date with Roman DeLuca. She settled on a simple black dress that accommodated her growing belly, paired with comfortable flats because her feet were too swollen for heels. Light makeup, hair down, and the only jewelry she owned, a simple silver necklace her mother had left her. When the knock came at 7:30 exactly, Clara took a deep breath and opened the door. Roman stood in her hallway looking devastating in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His gaze traveled over her slowly, appreciation clear in his dark eyes. You're beautiful, he said simply. Clara's face heated. You clean up pretty well yourself. Roman's lips curved. Ready? She grabbed her purse, locked her door, and let him guide her down to the street where a sleek black car waited. This is a bit much for dinner, Clara said as he opened the door for her. Nothing is too much for you. Roman waited until she was settled before closing the door and walking around to the driver's side. The restaurant he took her to was elegant but not intimidating, a small Italian place with soft lighting and intimate tables. The host greeted Roman by name and led them to a private corner booth. You come here often? Clara asked as Roman held her chair. My mother used to bring me here when I was a child, before she got sick. He settled across from her. It's one of the few places that feels like home. The admission was quietly offered, a piece of himself that Clara recognized as significant. Tell me about her, Clara said. Roman's expression softened. She was brilliant, kind but strong. She ran the family's charitable foundation, made sure we stayed connected to the community. She taught me that power means nothing if you don't use it to help people who can't help themselves. She sounds amazing. She was. Roman's voice roughened slightly. She would have liked you, the way you care for people, the way you fight for what matters. Clara's throat tightened. I wish I could have met her. So do I. Roman reached across the table, his hand covering hers. But I think she'd be happy knowing her son finally found someone worth fighting for. The waiter appeared before Clara could respond, and they ordered, Roman choosing wine for himself and sparkling water for Clara, both of them selecting pasta dishes that the waiter promised were the chef's specialties. When they were alone again, Roman leaned back and studied her. Tell me something about you that I don't know yet. Clara laughed nervously. You already seem to know everything. I know your coffee order and that you skip meals. I know you're an excellent nurse and that you're terrified of failing as a mother. His gaze was steady. But I don't know what made you want to become a nurse in the first place. I don't know what you do for fun when you're not working. I don't know what you dream about when you let yourself dream. Clara was quiet for a moment, surprised by the depth of the questions. My mother had cancer when I was 14, stage 4, terminal from the start. The nurses at the hospice where she spent her last months, they were incredible. They made her laugh when she was in pain, held my hand when I was scared, helped us both navigate something impossible. I wanted to be that for other people. Roman's hand tightened on hers. I'm sorry you lost her so young. Me too. Clara blinked back tears. But she taught me that strength isn't about not being afraid. It's about showing up even when you are. She was right. Roman's thumb traced patterns on her palm. And she'd be proud of who you've become. The simple certainty in his voice made Clara's chest ache. As for fun, she continued, trying to lighten the mood, I don't remember the last time I did something purely for enjoyment. Work, bills, survival. That's been my life for a while now. That needs to change. Roman's tone left no room for argument. Everyone needs something that brings them joy. And what brings you joy? Clara asked. Roman was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, this. Being here with you, seeing you smile, knowing you're taken care of. His dark eyes met hers. You bring me joy, Clara. Her breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. Their food arrived, and they ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Clara told him about nursing school, about her friendship with Jen, about the tiny apartment she could barely afford but loved because it had good light. Roman told her about growing up under his father's expectations, about learning the business, about the weight of family responsibility. Do you ever wish you could just walk away? Clara asked. Do something completely different. Sometimes. Roman set down his fork. But the business employs hundreds of people, supports families. My choices affect more than just me. I can't walk away from that responsibility. Even if it makes you unhappy? I'm not unhappy. Roman's gaze was steady. The work is demanding, but it's worthwhile. And I'm learning that duty doesn't have to mean sacrificing everything else. What else do you want? This, he gestured between them, someone to come home to. Someone who sees me as more than just the family name or business obligations. Someone who reminds me why the work matters. Clara's heart hammered. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I'm not asking you to fix me or complete me, Roman said. I'm asking you to share your life with me. Let me share mine with you. Build something together that's ours. We barely know each other, Clara whispered. How can you be so certain? Because when I'm with you, I feel more myself than I have in years. Roman leaned forward. Because you don't want anything from me except honesty. Because you fight for what matters, and I want to be one of the things you fight for. Clara couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the enormity of what he was offering. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. Roman's voice was gentle. But I'm asking you to be scared with me instead of alone. The waiter returned with dessert, tiramisu that Roman had ordered without asking because somehow he knew Clara would want something sweet. They shared it in quiet intimacy, and Clara felt her defenses crumbling with every passing moment. When they finally left the restaurant, Roman drove her home slowly, neither of them ready for the evening to end. He walked her to her door, and Clara turned to face him in the dim hallway light. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for dinner, for everything." "Clara." Roman's hand came up, cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. This isn't me feeling sorry for you or trying to fix your problems. This is me wanting you in my life because you make it better." Tears burned her eyes. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've never been more certain of anything." His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped. "Let me in, Clara, all the way. Let me be there for you and the baby. Let me show you what it's like to not carry everything alone." Clara looked up at him, at this complicated, intense man who'd somehow seen past all her defenses to the terrified woman underneath, who'd offered not just help but partnership, who made her feel valued and wanted and less alone than she'd felt in years. "Okay," she whispered, "I'm all in." Roman's expression transformed, relief and satisfaction and something deeper flickering across his features. "Yeah? Yeah." Clara managed a shaky smile. "I'm still terrified. But I want this. I want you." Roman's forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her face. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for trusting me, for giving me this chance." Then he kissed her, gentle and careful and full of promise, and Clara felt something fundamental shift inside her. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I should go. Before I forget how to be a gentleman," Clara laughed shakily. "Probably a good idea." He waited while she unlocked her door, then caught her hand one more time. "Tomorrow, dinner again. I want to introduce you to someone." "Who?" "You'll see." Roman's smile was mysterious. "Trust me?" Clara thought about everything they'd shared tonight, about his honesty and vulnerability and the way he'd opened himself to her. "Yes," she said. "I trust you." Roman's smile widened, and he pressed a kiss to her forehead before finally, reluctantly, stepping back. Clara watched him walk away, her heart full, and her mind racing with possibilities that no longer felt quite so terrifying. For the first time in months, the future looked like something other than survival. It looked like hope. The next evening, Roman picked Clara up in the same sleek car, but this time they drove to a part of the city she'd never been to. An exclusive neighborhood where old money lived behind iron gates and manicured hedges. Clara's stomach churned with nervousness as they pulled up to a sprawling estate that looked like something out of a magazine. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice small. "Home," Roman said simply. He glanced at her, reading the anxiety on her face. "My father wants to see you, outside the hospital. As family, not as his nurse." Clara's breath caught. "Roman, I'm not... We just started this. It's too soon for..." "He's being released tomorrow." Roman's hand found hers, warm and steadying. "He wants to thank you properly for taking care of him, and he wants to get to know the woman who matters to his son." The casual way he said it, "the woman who matters," made Clara's heart stutter. Roman helped her out of the car, keeping her hand in his as they walked toward the entrance. The front door opened before they reached it, and a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor smiled at them. "Mr. Roman, welcome home. Your father is waiting in the sitting room." "Thank you, Maria." Roman guided Clara inside, and she tried not to gape at the elegant interior. High ceilings, art that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, furniture that whispered old money and careful taste. They found Vincenzo in a room filled with comfortable chairs and warm lighting, looking stronger than he had in the hospital, but still pale. He rose when they entered, moving carefully, and his face broke into a genuine smile. "Clara, I'm so glad you could come." He gestured to the chairs near him. "Please, sit. Can Maria get you anything? Water? Tea?" "Water would be lovely. Thank you." Clara perched on the edge of a chair, hyper-aware of Roman settling beside her, his presence solid and grounding. Vincenzo studied them both with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look good together. Natural." Clara's face heated, but Roman just smiled. "We do." The certainty in his voice made Clara's stomach flutter. Maria brought water and excused herself, leaving the three of them in comfortable intimacy. Vincenzo leaned back in his chair, looking more relaxed than Clara had ever seen him. I wanted you here tonight for 2 reasons, he said. First, to thank you properly for the care you gave me. You went beyond what was required, and I noticed. I was just doing my job, Clara protested. No, Vincenzo's voice was firm. You cared about whether I lived or died. You fought for me when I was too weak to fight for myself. That's not just a job. That's a calling, and I'm grateful you answered it for me. Clara's throat tightened. You're welcome. The second reason, Vincenzo continued, his gaze shifting between Clara and Roman, is because my son has told me he's serious about you, about building something real, and I wanted to meet you properly, as the woman who might become part of this family. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Clara's pulse hammered in her throat. Father, Roman said quietly, a warning in his tone. I'm not presuming, Vincenzo said. I'm being honest about what I see. My son doesn't bring women here, doesn't introduce them to family, doesn't look at them the way he looks at you. His expression softened. So I wanted to know you, Clara, to understand who you are beyond the excellent nurse who saved my life. Clara glanced at Roman, who gave her an encouraging nod. She took a breath and met Vincenzo's gaze. I'm 26 years old, single, and 5 months pregnant with a baby whose father walked away the day I told him about her. I work 60-hour weeks at Mercy General because it's the only way I can afford rent and bills, and most days I'm terrified I'm going to fail at being a mother before I even start. The words tumbled out, raw and honest. I'm not sophisticated or wealthy or connected. I'm just someone trying to survive and do right by the child I'm bringing into this world. Vincenzo listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he nodded slowly. My wife, Roman's mother, came from nothing. Her father was a janitor, her mother cleaned houses. She had 2 dresses to her name when I met her, and she was working 3 jobs to put herself through college. His voice warmed with memory. Everyone told me I was crazy to marry someone from such a different world, that she wouldn't fit in, wouldn't understand our life, wouldn't be strong enough for what the family required. What happened? Clara asked quietly. She became the strongest person I ever knew. Vincenzo's eyes gleamed. She built our charitable foundation from nothing. She stood beside me through threats and difficulties and times when I wasn't sure we'd survive. She loved fiercely and fought harder, and she taught our son that real strength comes from caring about people, not controlling them. Roman's hand found Clara's, threading their fingers together. I tell you this, Vincenzo continued, because I recognize something in you that I saw in her. That fierce determination to protect what matters. That willingness to fight even when you're terrified. That strength that comes from caring deeply. He leaned forward. My son needs someone like that beside him. Someone who reminds him what he's fighting for. Clara's vision blurred with tears. I don't know if I'm that person. You are. Roman's voice was quiet but absolute. You already are. Vincenzo smiled. Besides, that baby of yours is going to need a strong family. People who will protect her and love her and make sure she has everything she needs. The DeLucas take care of our own, Clara. If you let us, we'll make sure you and your daughter are never alone again. The offer was overwhelming in its generosity and its implications. Clara looked at Roman, seeing the hope in his dark eyes, the silent plea for her to say yes to this strange, unexpected family he was offering. I need to be honest about something, Clara said, her voice shaking. I'm scared. Not just of being a mother, but of this, of you, of what you're offering, because if I let myself depend on it and it goes away, she couldn't finish the sentence. It won't go away. Roman turned to face her fully, both hands gripping hers now. I'm not David. I'm not going to walk out when things get hard. I'm not going to abandon you or the baby. I'm here, Clara, for as long as you'll let me be. You can't promise that. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You don't know what will happen. What if you change your mind? What if this is just... It's not. Roman's voice was fierce. I know my own mind. I know what I want. And what I want is you and that baby in my life, permanently, completely, no matter what comes. Vincenzo cleared his throat gently. Perhaps I should give you two some privacy. No, Clara wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to... You're processing something big. Vincenzo's voice was kind, Take all the time you need. But Clara, let me tell you something my wife told me when I was young and stupid and thought I had to control everything. She said the strongest thing a person can do is let someone else share the burden. That real courage isn't carrying everything alone. It's trusting someone enough to help carry it with you. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Wasn't that exactly what she'd been doing? Carrying everything alone because she was too afraid to trust, too scared to depend on anyone else? I don't know how to stop, she whispered. I don't know how to trust that someone will stay. Then let me show you. Roman's thumbs brushed away her tears. One day at a time. One moment at a time. Let me prove that I'm not going anywhere. Clara looked into his dark eyes and saw nothing but certainty. No doubt, no hesitation, no fear. Just absolute conviction that this was right. Okay, she breathed. One day at a time. Roman's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers, and Clara felt something inside her chest crack open. Not breaking, but opening to let in light she hadn't realized she'd been blocking. Vincenzo watched them with satisfaction. Good. Now that's settled. Let's have dinner. Maria's been cooking all afternoon and she'll be insulted if we don't eat properly. The meal was wonderful. Homemade pasta and fresh bread and vegetables that tasted like they'd been picked that morning. They ate in the formal dining room, but the atmosphere was warm and comfortable. Vincenzo telling stories about Roman's childhood that made Clara laugh and Roman protest. He was 7 years old and already trying to reorganize my office, Vincenzo said, grinning. Told me my filing system was inefficient and he could improve productivity by 40%. I was right, Roman said mildly. You were a terror. But Vincenzo's voice was full of love. Brilliant and determined and absolutely certain you knew better than everyone else. Some things don't change, Clara teased, and Roman's hand found her knee under the table, squeezing gently. After dinner, Vincenzo excused himself, doctor's orders to rest early, and Roman took Clara out to the terrace overlooking the gardens. The city lights sparkled in the distance, and the night air was cool and sweet. Thank you for coming tonight, Roman said, pulling her close against his side. I know it was overwhelming. A little. Clara leaned into his warmth. But your father is wonderful. I can see where you get your strength from. And my stubbornness? She laughed. That too. They stood in comfortable silence, and Clara let herself imagine, really imagine, what it might be like to build a life here. To have this kind of security and support. To let Roman be part of her and the baby's world. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Anything. What your father said about old connections and complicated history, how dangerous is it really? What am I stepping into? Roman was quiet for a long moment. The truth is, most of the dangerous elements are gone. My father spent years cleaning up the business, cutting ties with anyone who operated outside the law. But there are people who remember the old days, who think they're owed something or who want to use the DeLuca name for their own purposes. And those people could be a threat? Potentially. Roman's arm tightened around her. Which is why I take precautions. Security, careful vetting of business partners, maintaining distance from anyone questionable. I won't let my family's past put you or the baby at risk. Clara absorbed this, trying to reconcile the gentleman beside her with the world of calculated danger he was describing. Have you ever been in actual danger? Yes. Roman didn't sugarcoat it. Twice. Once when I was 22 and someone tried to use me as leverage against my father. And once, 3 years ago, when a business deal went bad and the other party made threats. What happened? I handled it. His voice was hard. No one threatens my family and walks away unscathed. The cold certainty in his tone sent a shiver down Clara's spine. Not fear exactly, but recognition of the steel beneath his careful control. I need you to understand something, Roman continued, turning to face her fully. If you choose this, choose me. I will protect you with everything I have. You and the baby will be as safe as I can possibly make you, but I won't lie and say there's no risk. My world comes with complications that most people never deal with. Clara thought about her current life, working endless hours, struggling to pay bills, facing single motherhood with no support and constant fear. Was Roman's world really more dangerous than the precarious existence she was already living? I'm already at risk, she said quietly. Every day I go to work exhausted, I'm risking my health and the baby's. Every month I struggle to make rent, I'm risking homelessness. Every shift I work alone at midnight in a hospital parking garage, I'm risking my safety. At least with you, I wouldn't be facing those risks alone. Roman's expression softened. No, you wouldn't be alone anymore. Then I choose this. Clara's voice was steady. I choose you. Complications and all. Roman kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and Clara felt the last of her resistance crumble. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me, he said. Clara's eyes flew open. What? Move in with me. Roman's hands framed her face. Not here, not yet. That's too much too fast. But I have an apartment in the city closer to the hospital, 3 bedrooms, good security, plenty of space. You and the baby would be safe and comfortable, and you wouldn't have to work yourself to exhaustion just to make rent. Roman, I can't just... Why not? His dark eyes searched hers. Give me one good reason why not. Because we've known each other for 3 weeks, Clara's voice rose. Because this is crazy. Because people don't just move in together after a few dates. People do it all the time when they're certain. Roman's voice was calm. And I'm certain about you, Clara. About us. I want you close. I want to know you're safe. I want to wake up knowing you and the baby are taken care of. Clara's mind raced. It was too fast, too much, too overwhelming, but it was also tempting beyond measure. Safety, security, someone who wanted to share the burden instead of adding to it. I need time to think, she said finally. Roman nodded, accepting this. Okay, think. But Clara, while you're thinking, remember something. I'm not offering charity. I'm not trying to buy you or control you. I'm offering partnership, a real relationship where we take care of each other. And what do you get out of this partnership? Clara asked. What do I bring to this equation besides problems and complications? Roman's smile was gentle. You bring yourself. Your strength, your kindness, your fierce determination to protect the people you love. You bring light into my world, Clara. You make me remember there's more to life than obligation and duty. That's worth everything. Clara's throat tightened with emotion. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone take care of me. Then let me teach you. Roman pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. One day at a time, remember? We'll figure it out together. They stood on the terrace for a long time, wrapped in each other's warmth, and Clara let herself imagine what it might be like to say yes. To step into this new life Roman was offering. To stop fighting alone. When Roman finally drove her home, Clara's mind was still spinning. He walked her to her door as always, but this time, when he kissed her goodnight, there was heat beneath the gentleness, a promise of more when she was ready. Think about it, he said against her lips. Really think about what we could build together. I will, Clara promised. She spent that night lying awake, one hand on her growing belly, weighing fear against hope. By morning, she still hadn't decided, but she knew she was closer to saying yes than no. At work the next day, Clara was assigned to help with Vincenzo's discharge. The older man was dressed and ready to go, looking stronger than he had in weeks. You're going to follow all of Dr. Morrison's instructions, right? Clara asked, reviewing his discharge papers. Light activity for 2 more weeks, cardiac rehab 3 times a week, medications exactly as prescribed? Yes, Nurse Bennett. Vincenzo's eyes twinkled. Though I'm hoping you'll come by to check on me personally. That's not really... As family, Vincenzo clarified. Not as my nurse. As the woman my son cares about. Clara's face heated. He told you about last night? He told me you're thinking about moving in together. Vincenzo's expression was approving. That's good. You belong together even if you're both too stubborn to see it yet. It's too fast, Clara protested weakly. Says who? Some arbitrary timeline that has nothing to do with your actual situation? Vincenzo shook his head. My wife and I were engaged after a week. Married after a month. People said we were crazy, that it would never last. But we knew. When you know, you know. Roman appeared in the doorway, and Clara's breath caught at the sight of him, powerful and controlled, and focused entirely on her. "Ready to go home?" he asked his father, but his eyes were on Clara. More than ready. Vincenzo stood carefully, accepting the wheelchair that hospital policy required. "Though I'm going to miss having Clara around every day." "You'll see her plenty," Roman said, "if I have anything to say about it." The certainty in his voice made Clara's stomach flutter. She walked them down to the main entrance where Roman's car was waiting. As Vincenzo settled into the passenger seat, he caught Clara's hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For saving my life, for caring about my son, for being brave enough to take a chance on our family." "I haven't decided yet," Clara said. "You will." Vincenzo smiled. "And when you do, you'll realize this was always where you were meant to end up." Roman walked Clara back to the hospital entrance, his hand warm on her lower back. "I know you need time," he said. "But Clara, I want you to know something. Whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere. If you need to keep your apartment and take this slower, we'll do that. If you want to move in tomorrow, we'll do that. The timeline doesn't matter. What matters is that we're building something real." Clara looked up at him, this complicated man who'd somehow seen past all her defenses to the terrified woman beneath. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could have anyone. Why choose someone with so many complications?" "Because you're real." Roman's hand cupped her face. "Because you don't want anything from me except honesty. Because when you look at me, you see a man, not a name or a bank account. Because you fight for what matters, and you don't give up, even when you're exhausted." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "And because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Clara's eyes burned with tears. "I'm scared." "I know, but be scared with me instead of alone." Roman pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Think about it, really think, and when you're ready, tell me what you need." He left her standing at the entrance, her heart full and her mind racing with possibilities. That evening, Clara came home to find Jen waiting in the hallway, eyes wide with excitement. "Okay, spill," Jen demanded. "You've been mysterious for weeks, and I want details. Who is he really? What's happening? And why do you look like someone who's either falling in love or having a nervous breakdown?" Clara unlocked her door and let Jen inside. "Maybe both?" Over tea and the fancy cookies Roman had sent in his latest delivery, Clara told Jen everything: the restaurant meeting, the groceries, the way Roman had inserted himself into her life with such quiet determination, Vincenzo's illness and recovery, the dinner at the estate, and Roman's offer for her to move in. Jen listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, concern, and cautious optimism. "So let me get this straight," she said finally. "Roman DeLuca, one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the city, wants you to move into his apartment, be part of his life, and help raise your baby like it's his own?" Clara nodded. "And you're hesitating because it's insane." Clara set down her tea with shaking hands. "Jen, we've known each other less than a month. Normal people don't move this fast. Normal people take time to build trust and figure out compatibility, and you're not in a normal situation," Jen interrupted. "You're pregnant, alone, and struggling, and he's offering you safety, security, and partnership. Plus, from what you've told me, he's not trying to control you or buy you. He's just showing up, being there, making your life easier in ways that matter." "But what if it's too good to be true?" Clara's voice cracked. "What if I let myself depend on this and he changes his mind? What if 6 months from now he realizes he doesn't actually want to raise someone else's baby and I'm worse off than I started?" Jen reached across the table and gripped Clara's hand. "That's the fear talking. But honey, you can't live your whole life protecting yourself from hypothetical hurt. At some point, you have to take a risk on something good." "What if I'm wrong about him?" "What if you're right?" Jen's voice was gentle. "What if he's exactly who he seems to be? Someone strong and protective who genuinely cares about you. Don't you deserve to find out?" Clara thought about Roman's steady presence, his quiet care, the way he made her feel seen and valued. "I don't know how to trust this." "Then trust yourself." Jen squeezed her hand. "Trust your instincts. You're an excellent judge of character. You have to be in your job. What do your instincts tell you about Roman?" Clara closed her eyes, listening to the truth she'd been trying to ignore. That he's honest. That he means what he says, that he'll show up and stay even when things get hard. Then maybe it's time to stop fighting and start believing. After Jen left, Clara sat alone in her tiny apartment, looking at the space she'd worked so hard to afford. It was small, and the heating was unreliable, and the neighbors were loud, but it was hers. Leaving it felt like giving up something important: her independence, her self-sufficiency, the proof that she could survive on her own. But was surviving the same as living? Her phone buzzed with a text from Roman. "How are you feeling?" Clara smiled despite her turmoil. Overwhelmed, confused, scared. That's honest. "Thank you for telling me." She stared at the screen, then typed, "Can I see the apartment before I decide?" The response came immediately. "Tomorrow. I'll pick you up after your shift." Clara set down her phone and placed both hands on her belly, where the baby was moving and shifting. "What do you think?" she whispered. "Should we take the leap?" The baby kicked in response, and Clara chose to interpret it as encouragement. The next evening, Roman drove her to a building in a neighborhood Clara had always loved but never been able to afford. The doorman greeted Roman by name, and they took a private elevator to the top floor. The apartment was beautiful: hardwood floors, huge windows overlooking the city, a kitchen that made Clara's heart sing with its space and modern appliances. The master bedroom had an ensuite bathroom with a tub that Clara immediately wanted to soak in. But what made her breath catch was the second bedroom, already set up as a nursery. A crib stood against one wall, still in its packaging. A changing table, a rocking chair, shelves ready for books and toys, everything a baby would need, waiting to be assembled and used. "You did this?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Roman stood in the doorway, watching her reaction. "I wanted you to see that I'm serious, that this isn't some vague offer. It's real. You and the baby would have everything you need here." Clara walked to the crib, running her fingers over the box. "This is expensive. All of this is expensive." "I can afford it." Roman moved to stand beside her. "Money isn't the point. The point is that you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. You could focus on staying healthy, preparing for the baby, working reasonable hours instead of killing yourself with doubles." "And what would you get out of this arrangement?" Clara asked, needing to hear him say it again. "You." Roman turned her to face him. "I get to come home to someone who matters. I get to be part of something real instead of just managing business and obligations. I get to help raise a child and be the kind of man who shows up when it counts." His hands framed her face. "I get you, Clara. That's everything." Clara looked around the nursery, imagining her daughter here, safe, warm, surrounded by everything she'd need. Then she looked at Roman, seeing the hope and certainty in his dark eyes. "I'm terrified," she said. "I know. But I want this." The admission came out broken. "I want you. I want this life you're offering. I want to stop being so tired and scared all the time." Roman's expression transformed with relief and joy. "Yeah?" "Yeah." Clara managed a shaky smile. "I'm saying yes, to moving in, to building something together, to taking this leap. Yes." Roman kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble completely. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for trusting me, for giving us this chance." "Thank you for not giving up on me," Clara whispered, "for seeing past all my fear and showing me what we could be." They stood in the empty nursery holding each other, and Clara felt something settle in her chest, not the absence of fear, but the presence of hope strong enough to outweigh it. Over the next week, Roman helped her move her meager belongings into the apartment. He hired movers for the furniture, personally carried her boxes, and insisted on her supervising rather than lifting anything herself. "The baby needs you to rest," he said when she protested. "Let me handle this." Jen came to help, her eyes wide as she took in the apartment. "Holy hell, Clara, this place is incredible." "I know," Clara said, still not quite believing it was real. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up." "If you do, please wake up somewhere that has this kitchen." Jen ran her hands over the granite countertops. "I would kill for this much counter space." Roman appeared with another box, and Jen straightened, suddenly nervous. "Mr. DeLuca, hi." "Roman, please." He set down the box and extended his hand. "You must be Jen. Clara talks about you constantly." Jen shook his hand, looking slightly dazed. "She talks about you too." Pretty much non-stop. Clara's face heated. Jen. What? It's true, Jen grinned. But I approve. Anyone who makes my best friend smile like this is okay in my book. Roman's expression softened as he looked at Clara. That's all I want to do. Make her smile. The simple honesty of it made Clara's chest ache. That night, after everything was unpacked and Jen had gone home, Clara stood in the living room of her new apartment, their apartment, and tried to process how much her life had changed in a month. Roman came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her back against his chest. His hands settled on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath his palms. She's active tonight, he said quietly. She knows something big is happening. Clara covered his hands with hers. Or maybe she's just happy we're finally home. Home, Roman repeated, and Clara heard the satisfaction in his voice. I like the sound of that. They stood together in the quiet apartment, and for the first time in months, maybe years, Clara felt safe. Truly, completely safe. Not because her circumstances had magically become easy, but because she was no longer facing them alone. Whatever came next, they would handle it together. And that made all the difference. The first 2 weeks in the apartment passed in a blur of domesticity that felt almost surreal. Clara would come home from her shifts to find Roman already there, working from the dining table with his laptop, phone constantly buzzing with business calls he'd take in the other room. He'd insist she put her feet up, bring her water or tea, ask about her day with genuine interest that still caught her off guard. You don't have to wait on me, she told him one evening, watching him prepare dinner with efficient movements that suggested he'd done this many times before. I'm not waiting on you. I'm cooking for us. Roman glanced over his shoulder, his expression soft. There's a difference. Most men your age can barely boil water. Most men my age had mothers who cooked for them until they moved out. Roman turned back to the stove. Mine died when I was 60. It was learn or survive on takeout. The casual mention of loss made Clara's chest ache. She knew his mother had passed, but hearing the age, 16, still so young, brought it into sharp focus. That must have been incredibly hard, she said quietly. It was. Roman's shoulders tensed slightly. She was sick for 2 years before the end. Cancer, aggressive and cruel. I watched her fade piece by piece, and there was nothing any of us could do to stop it. Clara understood that helplessness intimately. I was 14 when I lost my mother. Same thing. Cancer that didn't respond to treatment. Roman turned off the stove and came to sit beside her, taking her hand. Then you know what it's like. Watching someone you love suffer and being powerless to help. I do. Clara's throat tightened. The nurses at her hospice, they were the ones who made it bearable, who helped us both navigate the impossible. That's why I became a nurse. To be that person for other families. You are that person. Roman's grip tightened. You were for me and my father. You cared when you didn't have to. You fought for him. I fight for all my patients. I know. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung in the air between them, love, said so casually that Clara almost missed it. But Roman's eyes had widened slightly, as if he'd surprised himself with the admission. Roman, I know it's soon. His voice was rough. I know we're supposed to take things slow and be careful with words like that, but I'm not good at pretending, Clara. And the truth is I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since that night in the restaurant when you looked at me like I was crazy for helping you pick up your purse. Clara's breath caught. Her heart hammered against her ribs, fear and hope tangling into something overwhelming. You don't have to say it back, Roman continued quickly. I'm not expecting that. I just need you to know where I stand. That this isn't casual for me, that when I think about the future, you're in it. Clara looked at this man who'd turned her life upside down in the best possible way, who'd seen her at her lowest and offered not pity but partnership, who made her feel valued and protected and less alone than she'd felt in years. I'm falling too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Roman's expression softened. Why? Because what if this is a dream? What if I wake up and you're gone and I'm back to struggling alone? Her voice cracked. I've started depending on you, Roman, counting on you being here, and that scares me more than anything. Then let me prove I'm not going anywhere. Roman pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Every single day, let me show you that this is real, and I'm staying. Clara buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting herself believe just for a moment that maybe this could last. They stayed like that until the baby kicked hard enough to make them both laugh, breaking the emotional tension. Roman's hand immediately went to Clara's belly, his face lighting up at the movement. "She's strong," he said with pride, as if the baby were already his. "She's going to be a handful." Clara covered his hand with hers, just like her mother. "Good. The world needs more strong women who don't back down." Roman's gaze met Clara's. "Speaking of which, I need to tell you something about the business." Clara's stomach tightened at his serious tone. "What is it?" "There's a situation developing. An old associate of my father's, someone from before we went completely legitimate, has been making noise about wanting back in, claiming he's owed consideration for past favors." "What kind of favors?" Roman's jaw tightened. "The kind that happened 20 years ago and have nothing to do with how we operate now. But he's persistent, and he's started making veiled threats about going to authorities with information that could damage the family's reputation." Clara pulled back to look at him fully. "Is it true? The information he has?" "Some of it, probably." Roman's voice was hard. "My grandfather made deals that crossed lines. My father spent decades cleaning up those messes, but you can't erase history completely. There are always traces." "What are you going to do?" "Handle it." Roman's expression was cold in a way Clara had never seen before. "Make it clear that threatening my family is a mistake he won't make twice." The shift in his demeanor sent a chill down Clara's spine. This was the other side of Roman, not the gentleman who brought her tea and assembled cribs, but the one who'd inherited a complicated empire and learned to protect it with steel. "Will it be dangerous?" Clara asked quietly. "Not if I do it right." Roman's hand cupped her face. "But I'm telling you because you deserve to know, because this is the world I operate in sometimes. Not violence or crime, but power plays and careful negotiations and making sure people understand that the De Luca family can't be pushed around." Clara thought about Vincenzo's warnings, about the complicated legacy Roman had inherited. "Will this person hurt you? Hurt us?" "No." Roman's voice was absolute. "I won't let anyone touch you or the baby. That's a line no one crosses." The possessive certainty in his tone should have been frightening. Instead, Clara felt oddly comforted by it. Roman would protect what was his, and she and the baby were his now. "When do you meet with him?" she asked. "Tomorrow night. It's why I wanted to tell you today, so you wouldn't worry if I'm late coming home." "Home." The word settled warm in Clara's chest. "Be careful," she said. Roman kissed her forehead. "Always. I have too much to come home to now." The next evening, Clara tried not to watch the clock as 7 p.m. became 8, then 9. Roman had texted once, "Meeting running long. Don't wait up," but nothing since. She tried to distract herself with a book, then television, then organizing the nursery for the third time. By 10 p.m., she was pacing. By 11, she was seriously considering calling him. At 11:30, she heard his key in the lock. Clara rushed to the door as Roman walked in, and her breath caught at the sight of him. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt was rumpled, and there was a dark bruise forming along his jaw. What happened? She reached for his face, but he caught her hand gently. "I'm fine. It looks worse than it is." "Roman, the meeting got heated. He took a swing. I blocked, but his ring caught my jaw." Roman's voice was matter-of-fact. "Security removed him from the building, and he won't be bothering us again." Clara's hands trembled as she examined the bruise more closely. It was swelling, dark purple spreading across his skin. "You need ice. Sit down." She guided him to the couch and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with ice wrapped in a towel. Roman accepted it with a tired smile, pressing it to his jaw. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to worry you." "You got hit." Clara sat beside him, her professional training warring with personal fear. "Did he hurt you anywhere else? Any other injuries I should know about?" "Just my pride." Roman's smile was wry. "I'm out of practice at dodging punches." "This isn't funny." Clara's voice shook. "You could have been seriously hurt." "But I wasn't." Roman set down the ice and took her hands. "Clara, look at me. I'm fine. This is over. The threat is handled." "Until the next one." The words burst out before she could stop them. Until the next person from your father's past shows up wanting something. Until the next meeting that turns violent. How am I supposed to just accept that this is normal? Roman was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. You're right. This isn't normal for most people, but it's my reality sometimes. The weight of family history, the need to protect what's ours, the careful balance of power that keeps everyone safe. He squeezed her hands. I can't promise it will never happen again, but I can promise I'll always come home to you. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that occasional danger was just part of the package. But seeing him bruised and rumpled, knowing he'd been in an altercation that could have gone much worse, made everything feel too real. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. Roman pulled her close, careful of his bruised jaw. But we'll figure it out together, one crisis at a time. They sat in silence, Clara's head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Eventually, she insisted on examining the bruise properly, using her nursing skills to ensure there was no serious damage. Roman bore her ministrations with patient amusement, only wincing when she pressed too hard on a tender spot. You're lucky he just grazed you, she said, satisfied that nothing was broken or seriously injured. A few inches to the left and he could have shattered your cheekbone. I'll be more careful next time. There shouldn't be a next time. Clara's voice was fierce. Promise me you'll have better security at these meetings, that you won't put yourself at risk like this again. Roman's expression softened. I promise. No more meetings without adequate protection. That night, Clara lay awake long after Roman had fallen asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even. She watched the city lights play across the ceiling and tried to reconcile the life she'd chosen with the reality of what it meant. Roman's world wasn't just wealth and comfort. It was complicated power dynamics and old debts and occasional violence. But it was also safety and partnership and someone who came home to her every night, bruised or not. She could handle complicated. She'd been handling impossible her whole life. The bruise faded over the next week, and life settled back into routine. Clara cut back her hours at the hospital, not because Roman demanded it, but because he'd quietly arranged with her supervisor for a more reasonable schedule that wouldn't exhaust her or risk the baby. She'd been furious at first, feeling like he'd overstepped, but he'd simply said, Your supervisor was worried about you too. I just gave her permission to act on that worry. It was hard to argue with that, especially when the new schedule meant she had energy to actually enjoy her evenings instead of collapsing into bed immediately after work. She was 6 months pregnant now, her belly unmistakably round, the baby's movements strong enough to wake her at night. Roman was fascinated by every kick, every flutter, his hand constantly seeking her stomach to feel the life growing inside. Have you thought about names? He asked one evening. His palm spread across her belly while they watched a movie. Clara had been avoiding the subject, still not quite sure how to navigate the complexity of Roman's involvement in her daughter's life. A few, but I haven't decided on anything. Can I make a suggestion? She tensed slightly. Okay. What about Elena, after my mother? Roman's voice was careful, offering rather than demanding. I know she's not my biological daughter, but if we're building a family together, I'd like her to be connected to mine, only if you're comfortable with it. Clara's throat tightened with emotion. The gesture was so generous, so full of trust and hope that she couldn't speak for a moment. Elena, she repeated, testing the name. Elena Bennett. Or Elena DeLuca. Roman's voice was quiet. Eventually, if you want that. Clara's breath caught. He was talking about marriage without actually asking, leaving the door open for her to walk through when she was ready. Let's start with Elena Bennett, she said softly, and see where we go from there. Roman smiled and kissed her temple. Elena it is. The name settled something in Clara's chest. Her daughter had an identity now, a connection to the family that was claiming her as their own. It felt right in a way she hadn't expected. 2 weeks later, Clara was alone in the apartment when everything changed. Roman had gone to meet Vincenzo at the estate, something about reviewing quarterly financials that required his father's input. Clara had stayed home, enjoying a rare day off and planning to spend it organizing baby clothes and maybe taking a nap. She was folding tiny onesies when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A scrape of metal on metal, too deliberate to be accidental. Someone was trying to pick the lock. Clara's blood went cold. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and texted Roman. Someone's trying to break in. The door burst open before she could hit send. 3 men flooded into the apartment, moving fast and purposeful. Clara's scream caught in her throat as the closest one grabbed her arm, his grip brutal. "Shut up and come with us quietly, and you won't get hurt." Clara's nursing instincts kicked in through the terror. Assess, act, survive. The man holding her was mid-30s, professional in his movements, not random violence but planned abduction. The other 2 were spreading through the apartment, checking rooms with military efficiency. "Please," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm pregnant. Whatever you want, just don't hurt the baby." "We don't want to hurt anyone." The man's grip didn't loosen. "But Roman DeLuca needs to understand that his family is not untouchable. You're just a message." The casual cruelty of it, being reduced to a message, a tool to hurt Roman, made Clara's fear spike into terror. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, protecting Elena from harm she couldn't prevent. "He'll give you whatever you want," Clara said desperately. "Money, business deals, anything. Just let me go." "It's not about money." The man started pulling her toward the door. "It's about respect, about understanding that walking away from old partnerships has consequences." Clara understood then. This was connected to the associate who'd threatened Roman weeks ago, the one who'd been handled and removed. Apparently he hadn't stayed handled. She fought then, struggling against the grip on her arm, trying to break free. But the man was stronger, and she was off balance with pregnancy, and pain exploded across her face as he backhanded her hard enough to snap her head sideways. Clara tasted blood, felt her vision gray at the edges. "I said quietly," the man hissed. Through the ringing in her ears, Clara heard her phone buzz. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Roman, responding to her unsent text or maybe just checking in. The man holding her heard it too. He released her long enough to snatch the phone from her pocket, and in that split second of freedom, Clara ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just bolted for the bedroom where her purse held pepper spray that Roman had insisted she carry. Her hand was on the doorknob when someone grabbed her from behind, yanking her backward. Clara screamed, loud and piercing, hoping someone would hear, someone would call for help. But the apartment walls were thick, built for privacy, and her voice echoed uselessly in the space. She was thrown onto the couch hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. One of the other men appeared with duct tape, moving toward her with cold efficiency. "No!" Clara kicked out, connecting with his knee. He grunted but didn't stop, and then hands were on her, holding her down while tape was wound around her wrists. "We're leaving," the first man said into his phone. "Have the car ready." They were going to take her, use her as leverage against Roman, and Clara knew with absolute certainty that if they got her out of this apartment, she and Elena might not survive what came next. She fought with everything she had, kicking, biting, screaming, but 3 men against 1 pregnant woman was a losing battle. They lifted her bodily, carrying her toward the door, and Clara felt despair crashing over her. Then she heard it, running footsteps in the hallway, moving fast. The apartment door, which the men had left open, slammed against the wall as Roman burst through. His face was a mask of cold fury that Clara had never seen before. One of the men turned toward him, reaching for something in his jacket, but Roman moved faster. He caught the man's arm, twisted, and there was a sickening crack of bone breaking. The man screamed and dropped, and Roman was already moving to the next one. What happened next was brutal and efficient. Roman fought like someone trained for violence, every movement controlled and devastatingly effective. Within 30 seconds, 2 men were on the floor groaning, and the third, the one who'd hit Clara, was backing toward the window with fear in his eyes. "You touched her." Roman's voice was deadly quiet. "You put your hands on what's mine." "This wasn't personal," the man said quickly. "Just business. A message for your father about—" Roman hit him so hard that Clara heard the impact from across the room. The man crumpled, unconscious before he hit the floor. Then Roman was kneeling beside Clara, his hands gentle despite the violence still radiating from him. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" Clara couldn't speak past the terror still flooding her system. She could only nod toward her face, where her cheek was swelling and her lip was split. Roman's expression went absolutely arctic. He stood, pulled out his phone, and made a call with cold precision. 3 men in my apartment. They assaulted Clara. I want them contained until the police arrive, and I want to know who sent them. A pause. Yes, All three are incapacitated. I made sure of that. He hung up and returned to Clara, carefully cutting the duct tape from her wrists. His hands were shaking, she realized. Beneath the controlled fury, he was terrified. I'm sorry, he said roughly. I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. You should have been safe here. Clara threw her arms around him, finally breaking down completely. She sobbed into his chest while Roman held her, whispering reassurances and promises of safety that she desperately wanted to believe. Security arrived first. 2 men in suits who surveyed the scene with professional calm and began restraining the intruders. Then the police, then paramedics to check on Clara and the baby. The paramedic was gentle but thorough, checking Clara's vitals and using a portable monitor to verify the baby's heartbeat. Everything looks good, she said reassuringly. Strong heartbeat, no signs of distress. But you should follow up with your OB tomorrow, just to be safe. Clara nodded numbly, still processing what had happened. The police took statements. Roman's account was calm and precise. He'd received a partial text from Clara, knew something was wrong, and arrived to find men assaulting his girlfriend. He'd defended her, used appropriate force, and called authorities immediately. The intruders were taken away in handcuffs, and the lead detective assured Roman they'd get to the bottom of who'd sent them. When everyone finally left, Roman locked the door and turned to Clara. Pack a bag. We're leaving. What? This apartment isn't safe anymore. They found it, got past security, got to you. Roman's voice was hard. We're going to the estate where there's proper protection until I can ensure this won't happen again. Clara wanted to argue, to insist they couldn't just run, but her face was throbbing and her hands were still shaking, and all she could think about was how close she'd come to losing everything. Okay, she whispered. Roman helped her pack essentials, his movements efficient despite the tension in his shoulders. Within 20 minutes, they were in his car heading toward the estate, a security vehicle following close behind. Vincenzo met them at the door, his face grave. I heard what happened. Are you all right, Clara? Physically, yes. Clara touched her swollen cheek. Emotionally, I'm not sure yet. Come inside. We'll keep you safe here. Vincenzo's voice was gentle, but when he looked at Roman, Clara saw something harder pass between them. We need to talk. Now. Roman settled Clara in a guest room with reassurances that he'd be back soon, then disappeared with his father. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her mind replaying the attack over and over. She'd been so naive, thinking that Roman's world was manageable, that occasional danger was acceptable, that love could overcome the reality of who he was and what he represented. But someone had broken into her home, had grabbed her, hit her, threatened her unborn child. And it had happened because of Roman, because of his family, because she'd chosen to be part of this complicated world. Clara placed both hands on her belly, feeling Elena move beneath her palms. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I put you in danger. When Roman returned an hour later, his expression was grim. Tell me the truth, Clara said before he could speak. All of it. Who sent them and why and what you're going to do about it. Roman sat beside her, taking her hand carefully. It was connected to the associate I dealt with last month. Apparently having him removed wasn't enough. He hired people to send a message, to prove that walking away from old partnerships has consequences. And now? Now he'll face actual consequences. Roman's voice was cold. He orchestrated an attack on a pregnant woman. The police have enough to charge him, and my lawyers will make sure he spends years in prison for it. That's not enough. Clara pulled her hand away. This can't keep happening, Roman. I can't live in fear that every time you handle a threat, someone will retaliate by coming after me. They won't. Not after this. Roman's jaw was tight. I'm making it clear to everyone in my world that you and Elena are untouchable, that harming you means facing me at my worst. No one will risk that. You can't guarantee that. I can, and I will. Roman's voice was fierce. Clara, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But running from this won't keep you safer. It'll just leave you without protection. Clara looked at him, seeing the determination in his dark eyes, the absolute certainty that he could protect her if she'd just let him. I don't know if I can live like this, always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the next threat. Then let me handle it so you don't have to. Roman cupped her face gently, careful of the bruise. Stay here at the estate where security is tight. Let me deal with the people who think they can use you against me. Give me time to make this right. Clara wanted to say yes, wanted to believe he could fix this, make the world safe again. But her face was throbbing and her hands were still shaking, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw those men flooding through the door. I need time to think, she said finally. Roman's expression fell, but he nodded. Okay, take all the time you need. But Clara, please don't shut me out. Don't make decisions based on fear without talking to me first. I won't, she promised, even though part of her was already calculating what it would take to disappear, to take Elena somewhere safe and normal and far away from this dangerous world. That night, lying alone in the guest room with security posted outside her door, Clara cried until she had no tears left. She'd been so close to happiness, to building something real with Roman, to giving Elena the family and stability she deserved. But the cost of that happiness was too high if it meant constant danger. Her phone buzzed with a text from Roman, whose bedroom was on the other side of the estate. I love you. Whatever you decide, that won't change. Clara stared at the message, her heart breaking, because she loved him too, desperately, completely, in a way that terrified her. But love wasn't always enough to overcome reality. She typed back, I love you too. I just don't know if that's enough anymore. Roman's response came immediately. It is. We'll make it enough. Just don't give up on us yet. Clara set down her phone and placed both hands on her belly, feeling Elena move and shift. What do we do? She whispered to her daughter. How do we choose between safety and love? Elena kicked in response, and Clara wished desperately that the answer was as simple as her baby's movements suggested. Tomorrow, she'd have to decide. Stay and fight for this relationship despite the danger, or leave and protect Elena from a world that had already proven itself willing to hurt them. Neither choice felt right. Neither choice felt safe. And Clara had never felt more alone, even with Roman just rooms away and security surrounding the estate. She cried herself to sleep and dreamed of men breaking through doors, of running and never finding safety, of losing everything she'd dared to hope for. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sound of voices downstairs. For a moment, she was disoriented, then everything came rushing back. The attack, the fear, the terrible choice she was facing. Her phone showed 3 messages from Roman, all sent in the early hours of the morning. I can't sleep knowing you're hurting. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it, even if it kills me. I love you. That's all I know for certain. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back fresh tears. She wanted to go to him, to let him hold her and promise everything would be okay. But her face still throbbed where she'd been hit, and every time she moved too quickly, her body reminded her of yesterday's violence. A soft knock at the door made her tense. Clara, it's Vincenzo. May I come in? She sat up, pulling the blanket around herself. Yes? Vincenzo entered carrying a breakfast tray. Coffee for himself, herbal tea, and toast for her. His movements were careful, still recovering from his own surgery, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. How are you feeling? He asked, setting the tray on the bedside table. Physically? Sore? Emotionally? Clara touched her swollen cheek. Lost. Vincenzo settled into the chair beside the bed with a quiet sigh. My son is downstairs making phone calls and terrorizing anyone who might have information about yesterday's attack. He hasn't slept, hasn't eaten, and looks like he's ready to burn the city down if it means keeping you safe. I know, Claire's voice cracked. That's part of the problem. I can't ask him to live like that, constantly on edge, constantly fighting battles because of me. You didn't ask for this. Vincenzo's tone was gentle, but firm. These men made a choice to use you as leverage. That's on them, not you. But it happened because of Roman, because I'm with him. Clara met Vincenzo's gaze. How do I justify staying when it puts Elena at risk? What kind of mother chooses a relationship over her child's safety? Vincenzo was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark eyes that saw too much. Can I tell you a story? Clara nodded. When my wife was pregnant with Roman, we had a situation. A business associate who felt cheated tried to intimidate us by making threats against her. Nothing physical, just phone calls and letters, but it was enough to terrify her. Vincenzo's expression grew distant with memory. She told me she was leaving, taking our unborn son somewhere safe, somewhere far away from my world. Said she couldn't raise a child in constant fear. What did you do? Clara whispered. I told her I understood, that I'd support whatever decision she made, even if it destroyed me. Vincenzo's voice roughened, and then I handled the threat. Not with violence, but with evidence of what he'd done presented to the right authorities. He went to prison for extortion and other crimes, and he never bothered us again. And your wife stayed? She did, because I'd proven that I could protect her without becoming the kind of man she feared I might be, that I could handle threats without compromising my integrity. Vincenzo leaned forward. Roman is trying to do the same thing right now. He's not looking for revenge. He's building a case that will keep that man and his associates away from you permanently. Legal, thorough, and permanent. Clara absorbed this, thinking about the difference between Roman's cold fury yesterday and his measured response this morning. He really thinks he can make this safe? I know he can. Vincenzo's certainty was absolute. My son is brilliant at what he does. He's spent his entire adult life learning how to protect this family while staying on the right side of the law. Give him a chance to prove it to you. And if another threat emerges, someone else from your family's past who decides I'm a useful target, then Roman will handle that too. And the next one, and the one after that, until people understand that threatening what he loves is a losing proposition. Vincenzo's gaze was steady. But Clara, you need to understand something. Running won't make you safer. These people know who you are now. Leaving Roman just means facing threats without his protection. The truth of it hit Clara like a physical blow. She'd been thinking that leaving would mean safety, but Vincenzo was right. She'd been identified, targeted. Walking away from Roman wouldn't erase that. I'm trapped, she said, the realization devastating. No. Vincenzo's voice was firm. You're protected. There's a difference. Being with Roman means you have resources, security, people who will fight to keep you safe. Being without him means facing this alone. Clara thought about her tiny apartment with its flimsy locks, her irregular work schedule that would leave her vulnerable, the isolation of trying to raise Elena without support. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this world. You're stronger than you think. Vincenzo stood carefully, wincing slightly. You've already survived poverty, grief, abandonment, and yesterday's attack. You're a fighter, Clara. The question isn't whether you're strong enough, it's whether you're brave enough to stop fighting alone. He left her with that thought, taking his coffee and closing the door quietly behind him. Clara sat in the sunlit room, one hand on her belly where Elena was starting to wake and move. What do you think? She whispered to her daughter. Do we stay and fight, or do we run? Elena kicked hard, as if offering an opinion, and Clara felt a ghost of a smile cross her face. She was still sitting there when Roman knocked softly and entered at her invitation. He looked terrible, exhausted and rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. But when he saw her, his expression flooded with relief. You're awake. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, Clara gestured to her face. Literally. Roman crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, his hands gentle as they examined her bruised cheek. I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. Your father told me what you're doing, building a legal case. Yes. Roman's jaw was tight. The police have enough evidence to charge Marcus Vitelli, that's the associate who orchestrated this, with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, assault, and making terroristic threats. My lawyers are also pursuing civil charges that will bankrupt him even if he somehow avoids prison. He won't be able to hire anyone to threaten you again. And his associates? The men who actually broke in? Already charged, already talking to reduce their sentences. They're giving up everyone involved in exchange for plea deals. Roman's voice was cold. By the time we're done, anyone who even thought about using you against me will understand it was the worst mistake of their lives. Clara studied his face, seeing the controlled fury still simmering beneath his exhaustion. You're not going to hurt them yourself? No. Roman met her gaze directly. I wanted to. When I saw you on that couch with your hands taped, with that bruise on your face, I wanted to kill every one of them. But that's not who I am anymore. That's not who I want to be for you and Elena. The use of the baby's name, the casual inclusion of himself in their future, made Clara's chest ache. I've been thinking about leaving, she said quietly. Taking Elena somewhere safe and starting over where no one knows about you or your family. Roman's expression cracked, pain flickering across his features before he controlled it. I understand. If that's what you need to feel safe, I'll help you. Set you up somewhere secure. Make sure you have everything you need. I won't fight you on it. You just let me go? I'd hate it. Roman's voice was rough. It would destroy me, but I love you enough to want you safe, even if that means losing you. Clara's vision blurred with tears. Your father pointed out that leaving doesn't actually make me safer, that I'm already a known target. He's right. Roman's hands found hers, gripping carefully. But I can protect you better here, with my resources and security. I can make sure no one gets close enough to hurt you again. By keeping me locked up in this estate forever? No. Roman's voice was fierce. By making it clear to everyone in my world that you're untouchable. By building legitimate businesses that don't attract dangerous attention. By being smart and careful and ruthless when necessary to keep my family safe. Your family, Clara repeated softly. You keep saying that, but Elena isn't yours, not biologically. Roman's expression softened. She's mine in every way that matters. From the moment I saw that ultrasound photo, from the first time I felt her kick, from every conversation we've had about her future, she's been mine. And if you'll let me, I want to make that official. Clara's breath caught. What are you saying? Roman released her hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. When he opened it, Clara saw a ring, simple, elegant, with a diamond that caught the morning light. I was going to wait, Roman said quietly. Do this properly, romantically, without the shadow of yesterday's violence hanging over us. But I can't wait anymore, Clara. I need you to know that I'm all in, completely, permanently, forever. He shifted to one knee beside the bed, still holding the box. Marry me. Not because of the attack or because you're trapped, but because I love you. Because I want to build a life with you and Elena. Because I want to be the man you come home to, the father Elena deserves, the partner who shares every burden and every joy. His voice roughened with emotion. Marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Clara couldn't breathe past the overwhelming surge of emotion. This man, this complicated, intense, protective man who'd turned her world upside down, was offering her everything she'd been afraid to want. I'm terrified, she whispered. I know. So am I. Roman's dark eyes held hers. But I'd rather be terrified together than safe and alone. Say yes, Clara. Choose us. Choose this family we're building. Clara looked at the ring, then at Roman's face, then down at her belly where Elena was moving and shifting. She thought about the past months, how Roman had shown up and stayed, how he'd cared for her in ways big and small, how he'd fought to keep her safe even when it meant exposing himself to danger. She thought about the alternative, raising Elena alone, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if Roman would have been enough if she'd been brave enough to stay. And she realized that Vincenzo was right. She wasn't trapped. She was protected. And there was a world of difference between those two things. Yes, she said, the word coming out choked with tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Roman's expression transformed, relief and joy and love flooding his features. He slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her close, careful of her bruised face and pregnant belly. Thank you, he said roughly against her hair. Thank you for trusting me, for giving us this chance. Clara held him tight, feeling something fundamental settle in her chest. This was right. Terrifying and complicated and probably insane, but right. I love you, she whispered, even though you're bossy and overprotective and you make me eat vegetables. Roman laughed, the sound breaking with emotion. I love you too, even though you're stubborn and independent and you fight me on every reasonable safety precaution. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other, before Clara pulled back to look at him properly. We need ground rules, she said. I'm not going to live in a cage, Roman. I won't be locked away in this estate or treated like I'm too fragile to function. Agreed. But you will accept reasonable security measures. And you'll tell me when you're scared instead of making plans to leave without talking to me first. Clara winced. You knew about that? I know you. Roman's smile was gentle. And I understand the instinct to run when things get scary. But we're partners now. We face things together. Partners, Clara repeated, testing the word. That means you don't make decisions about my life without consulting me. No more arranging my work schedule or sending deliveries without asking. Fair, but you have to actually tell me what you need instead of pretending you're fine when you're not. Clara considered this. Deal. Anything else? Marry me soon. Roman's voice was serious. I don't want to wait months or years. I want Elena to be born into a complete family. How soon are we talking? Next month. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Nothing elaborate, just us making it official. Clara thought about traditional weddings, long engagements, careful planning, all the rituals she'd once imagined. Then she thought about the reality of her situation, 7 months pregnant, still recovering from an attack, wanting nothing more than to start their life together without more waiting. Okay, she said. Next month. But I get to plan it. Whatever you want. Roman kissed her forehead. As long as you show up and say yes when it counts, I don't care about the details. A knock on the door interrupted them, and Vincenzo's voice called out, I'm assuming from the lack of crying that things went well? Roman laughed and called back, She said yes. The door opened and Vincenzo stood there with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. Congratulations. I told you she was smart enough to see past her fear. You told her about your situation with Mom, Roman said. Someone had to. Vincenzo moved into the room. These things have a way of repeating through generations. Might as well learn from history instead of repeating all the mistakes. Clara held up her hand, showing off the ring. It's beautiful. It was my mother's, Vincenzo said softly. Roman's grandmother. She wore it for 60 years of marriage, through good times and impossible ones. I'm glad to see it on your hand, Clara. The weight of tradition and family history made Clara's throat tight. I'll take good care of it. Take care of my son instead. Vincenzo's gaze was knowing. The ring is just metal and stone. But what you two are building, that's the real treasure. Over the next 3 weeks, Roman made good on every promise. The legal case against Marcus Vitelli and his associates moved forward with devastating efficiency. Evidence piled up, recorded communications, financial transactions, testimony from the men who'd broken into the apartment. The prosecutor was confident of multiple convictions that would keep them all in prison for years. Roman also restructured his business operations, cutting the last remaining ties to any associate who had questionable connections. He brought in new partners with impeccable reputations, diversified into completely legitimate ventures, and made it clear to everyone in his world that the DeLuca family was done with anything that operated in gray areas. I want Elena to grow up proud of what we do, he told Clara one evening, not ashamed or scared of her family's reputation. Clara watched him work, saw the careful attention he paid to every detail, and fell more in love with him every day. The wedding was planned for the last Saturday in September, just 2 weeks before Clara's due date. Jen served as maid of honor, crying happy tears through the entire ceremony. Vincenzo stood beside Roman, his recovery complete, pride obvious on his face. A handful of close friends and business associates filled the estate's garden, where Clara and Roman exchanged vows under a canopy of late summer flowers. Clara wore a simple cream dress that accommodated her 8-month belly, her hair swept up in loose curls. Roman looked devastating in a dark suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked toward him. You're beautiful, he said when she reached him. You're biased, Clara whispered back. Completely, but still accurate. The ceremony was short and intimate. Clara promised to love Roman through complications and danger, through fear and joy for the rest of her life. Roman promised to protect and cherish Clara and Elena, to be the partner and father they deserved, to build a life worthy of their trust. When he slipped a wedding band beside the engagement ring, his hands were steady but his voice roughened with emotion. With this ring, I claim you as mine, and I give myself as yours. Forever. Clara's vows were simpler but just as meaningful. I choose you, today and every day, through everything that comes. The officiant pronounced them married, and Roman kissed her with such gentle reverence that Clara felt tears stream down her face. I love you, he whispered against her lips. Thank you for choosing us. The reception was elegant but comfortable, held in the estate's ballroom with food that reminded Clara of their first real date. She and Roman danced their first dance slowly, Clara's belly between them, both of them laughing when Elena kicked hard enough to interrupt the moment. "She's celebrating too," Roman said, his hand on Clara's stomach. "Or protesting that we're crushing her." Clara smiled up at him. "Either way, she's making her presence known." Vincenzo gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure, talking about watching his son find the kind of partnership that made life worthwhile. Jen told embarrassing stories from nursing school that had Clara blushing and Roman grinning, and through it all, Clara felt surrounded by love and safety in a way she'd never experienced before. This strange, unexpected family she'd fallen into had claimed her completely, and she'd claimed them back. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had left and Clara was exhausted but happy, Roman led her upstairs to the master bedroom they'd be staying in until after the baby came. He helped her out of her dress with gentle hands, both of them moving slowly, savoring the moment. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling her into bed. "Married, pregnant, terrified and happy and completely overwhelmed." Clara smiled at him. "So basically, normal." Roman laughed and climbed in beside her, pulling her carefully into his arms. "Mrs. DeLuca, I like the sound of that." "Me too." Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Though I'm keeping Bennett professionally. My patients know me by that name." "Whatever you want." Roman's hand found her belly, feeling Elena shift and move. "As long as you and our daughter are safe and happy, nothing else matters." But 2 weeks later, Clara woke at 3 a.m. with contractions that stole her breath. "Roman." She shook his shoulder. "It's time." He was awake instantly, moving with efficient calm as he helped her dress and gathered the hospital bag they'd prepared. The drive to Mercy General took 15 minutes that felt like hours, Clara breathing through contractions while Roman held her hand and murmured reassurances. The labor was long and difficult, 14 hours of pain that pushed Clara to her limits. Roman never left her side, letting her crush his hand during contractions, bringing her ice chips, wiping sweat from her forehead. When the pain got too intense and Clara cried that she couldn't do it anymore, Roman held her face between his hands and told her she was the strongest person he'd ever known, that she could do anything, that their daughter was almost here. Vincenzo arrived halfway through, pacing the waiting room with Jen, both of them anxiously awaiting news. At 5:47 p.m., after one final agonizing push, Elena Rose DeLuca came into the world screaming her displeasure at the sudden cold and brightness. "She's perfect," the doctor said, placing the baby on Clara's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Clara looked down at her daughter, pink and wrinkled and furious, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be brown like Roman's, and felt her heart crack open with a love so fierce it hurt. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Roman stood beside the bed, one hand on Clara's shoulder, tears streaming openly down his face as he looked at the tiny life they'd brought into the world. "She's beautiful," he said roughly. "Just like her mother." Elena's crying settled into quiet snuffles as she found Clara's breast, instinct taking over. The delivery room went quiet except for the soft sounds of the baby nursing, and Clara felt Roman's hand tighten on her shoulder. "You did it," he said. "You were amazing." Clara looked up at him through her own tears. "We did it. Together." A nurse came to check Elena's vitals, pronounced her healthy and strong, and wrapped her in a soft blanket before handing her to Roman. He accepted the baby with reverent care, cradling her against his chest like she was made of glass. "Hi, Elena," he said softly. "I'm your dad. I've been waiting to meet you for months now." The simple claim, "I'm your dad," made Clara's throat tight. There was no hesitation, no qualifier about biology or legal relationships, just absolute certainty that this baby was his daughter in every way that mattered. Elena's tiny hand wrapped around Roman's finger, holding tight, and he let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "She's got a good grip," he said, looking at Clara with wonder. "She's going to be strong." "Like her father," Clara said. Vincenzo and Jen were allowed in shortly after, both of them crying at the sight of the baby. Vincenzo held his granddaughter with the careful expertise of someone who'd done this before, tears streaming down his face as he welcomed Elena to the family. "You're going to have an amazing life," he told the baby. "You're loved already by so many people. And your parents, they're going to give you everything, protect you from everything. You're the luckiest little girl in the world." Jen held Elena next, cooing over her tiny features and perfect fingers. "She's beautiful, Clara, absolutely beautiful. And she has no idea how hard her mama fought to get here." That night, after the visitors had left and Elena was sleeping in the bassinet beside Clara's hospital bed, Roman settled carefully on the edge of the mattress. Clara was exhausted, her body aching from labor, but she'd never felt more complete. "Thank you," Roman said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me. For staying when you were scared. For letting me be part of this." He gestured to Elena, to the hospital room, to the life they'd built together. "I know it wasn't easy. I know you had to be brave in ways that shouldn't have been necessary." Clara reached for his hand. "You made it worth it. Every scary moment, every difficult choice, you made it worth it by showing up and staying and being exactly who you promised you'd be." "I'm going to keep showing up." Roman's grip tightened. "Every day, for the rest of our lives. I'm going to be the father Elena deserves and the husband you need. I'm going to protect you both from everything I can and help you face what I can't prevent. That's my promise." "I know." Clara smiled, exhaustion pulling at her. "You've already proven it 1,000 times over." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Elena sleep, until Clara's eyes grew too heavy to keep open. Roman kissed her forehead and settled into the chair beside her bed, keeping watch over his family while they rested. 3 days later, they brought Elena home to the estate, where a fully equipped nursery waited. Clara had worried about feeling overwhelmed, about not knowing how to be a mother, but Roman was there for every diaper change and midnight feeding, learning alongside her. "I have no idea what I'm doing," he admitted one night at 2 a.m., trying to soothe a crying Elena while Clara pumped milk. "Join the club." Clara smiled at the sight of her powerful husband reduced to helpless uncertainty by an 8-pound baby. "But we're figuring it out together." And they did. Day by day, night by night, they learned Elena's patterns and preferences. They took turns walking her when she was fussy, celebrated her first smile, marveled at how fast she was growing. Vincenzo visited daily, completely besotted with his granddaughter, often found holding her while she slept so Clara and Roman could rest. 6 weeks after Elena's birth, Clara returned to work part-time. Roman had wanted her to take more time off, but she'd insisted she needed the purpose and identity that nursing gave her. They compromised. She'd work 3 shifts a week, never more than 8 hours, and always with the understanding that Elena came first. The first night Clara worked, she came home to find Roman asleep on the couch with Elena on his chest, both of them breathing in perfect synchrony. She stood in the doorway, her heart full to bursting, and thought about how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been alone and terrified, dropping her purse in a restaurant and scrambling to hide her pregnancy from a room full of strangers. Now she had a husband who loved her, a daughter who filled every day with wonder, a family who'd claimed her as their own. She had security and safety and partnership she'd never imagined possible. It hadn't been easy. There had been fear and danger and moments when she'd almost run from the very things that saved her. But she'd been brave enough to stay, and Roman had been strong enough to prove himself worthy of that bravery. Clara walked over and kissed Roman's forehead, then Elena's. "I love you both," she whispered. "More than I ever knew was possible." Roman's eyes opened, immediately alert. "You're home. How was your shift?" "Long but good." Clara settled beside them. "How was Elena?" "Perfect. We read 3 books, she had a bottle, and we had a very serious conversation about why she can't stay up past 8 p.m. Roman's smile was soft. She disagreed with my reasoning, but eventually accepted it. Clara laughed and rested her head on his shoulder, one hand on Elena's back. This was her family. Complicated and unexpected and absolutely perfect. 3 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning with snow falling outside and Elena babbling happily in her bouncer, Roman looked up from the financial reports he was reviewing and caught Clara watching him. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing. Just thinking about how lucky I am." Roman set aside his work and pulled her into his lap, careful not to disturb Elena's play. "I'm the lucky one. You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing." "We gave each other everything," Clara corrected. "That's how partnerships work." "Is that what this is?" Roman's eyes gleamed with affection. A partnership? Among other things, Clara kissed him softly. Also a family. Also the best thing that ever happened to me, even if it started with me dropping my purse and wanting to die of embarrassment. Best accident of my life, Roman said against her lips. Finding you. Convincing you to trust me. Building this life together. Elena squealed happily from her bouncer, demanding attention, and they both laughed. Roman lifted his daughter up, spinning her gently while she giggled with delight. You know what she needs? Clara said, watching them with a smile. What? A sibling, eventually. When we're ready. Roman's expression transformed with hope and joy. Yeah? Yeah. Clara stood and wrapped her arms around both of them. This family isn't quite complete yet. There's room for more. I love you, Roman said, his voice rough with emotion. Both of you, more than words can say. We love you too, Clara whispered. And in that moment, surrounded by the family she'd been brave enough to choose, and the man who'd been patient enough to wait for her to choose him, she felt completely, perfectly, impossibly happy. The fear hadn't disappeared entirely. She still sometimes had nightmares about the attack, still worried about dangers she couldn't control. But Roman was always there when she woke, grounding her, reminding her that she was safe and loved and never alone. And that made all the difference. Years later, when Elena was old enough to ask how her parents met, Clara would tell her about dropping a purse in a fancy restaurant and a kind man who helped pick up the pieces. She'd leave out the complicated parts until Elena was older, until she could understand that sometimes love meant being brave enough to trust, and sometimes family meant choosing the people who choose you back. But she'd always end the story the same way. And then your father asked me to build a life with him. It was the scariest thing I'd ever done and the best decision I ever made. Because sometimes the most terrifying leap is the one that leads you exactly where you're meant to be. Roman, listening from the doorway, would smile and add, and your mother was brave enough to take that leap. That's how we became a family. Elena would laugh and demand they tell it again, and Clara and Roman would exchange a look over their daughter's head, a look full of love and gratitude and the quiet certainty that they'd found exactly what they'd both been searching for, even before they knew they were searching. In the end, the accident that had humiliated Clara in that upscale restaurant became the moment that changed everything. The dropped purse, the scattered belongings, the ultrasound photo that had revealed her vulnerability to a stranger who became her salvation. All of it had led her here, to this life she'd been too afraid to dream of. And she was grateful for every terrifying, beautiful moment of the journey.